Chapter 124. Usually at this time, no one dared to mess with Qin Mo. But Fujio was different. In her eyes, nothing was scary. It would be better if you could be a little more tolerant. I haven't thrown you out yet. I'm already being very tolerant. Qin Mo glanced at the youngster's hand lightly, and his voice was low. Fujio looked at her posture and explained seriously. I'm doing this because I'm close to Brother Mo. I see that there are many people who are close to you, such as Shui Yaoyao. Qin Mo sneered. He hadn't expected this guy to have feelings for such a girl. He tugged at his shirt and changed the topic. Are you hungry? Qin Mo's lips curled into a smile as he looked at Qin Mo. Fujio nodded with a lollipop in her mouth. I've been hungry for a long time. Hearing that, Qin Mo glanced at the youngster. But he felt that he was making a mountain out of a molehill. It was just a good feeling, not a liking. It was normal to have feelings for people at this age. Too much discipline would indeed attract disgust. Youth was rebellious. Thinking of these words, Qin Mo decided to discipline him appropriately and not overdo it. What do you want to eat? Qin Mo asked Fujio as he walked to the phone. Fujio thought for a while. Spicy hot pot, with more tripe and beef, and a plate of vegetables. Qin Mo didn't attack the youngster for being a foodie after hearing that. He lowered his eyes and pressed the intercom. Hello, Auntie Zhang, let's eat at home. Prepare some hot pot seasonings, spicy seasonings, and... Fujio looked at the man's handsome and elegant side profile, and was a little surprised. She thought they would go out to eat, but she didn't expect to eat at Qin's house. Look around first, I'm going to change. After saying this, Qin Mo tugged at his collar as if he was going to walk into his bedroom. Then he thought of something and stopped, asking, Do you want to change too? Of course, Fujio wouldn't agree. She didn't want to experience what happened in the changing room again. Brother Mo's clothes are too big for me. Hearing that, Qin Mo looked the youngster up and down. He was indeed a little short. But he didn't say this out loud. As a good brother, it was necessary to save some face for his little brother. Unfortunately, Fujio didn't realize that the Almighty was saving her face. After all, Almighty Qin's eyes were too expressive. She wasn't stupid, so she knew what he was thinking. She looked down at herself. She was 173 centimeters. As a girl, she wasn't short at all. Since her master was gone, of course Fujio would walk around. She was especially interested in this man who had almost caught her. After all, she had been free and unfettered in the West for so many years. The police had sent a lot of manpower to lock onto her, but they had yet to find her. They didn't even know whether she was a man or a woman. This time, she was found out partly because she couldn't keep up with the tools she used before. But even so, the Almighty's reasoning ability was inhuman. With Qin with he with he fu with I he with he I fu he fu he with he with he. Chapter 125. On the mainland, there weren't many people who could study criminal psychology. What's more, there weren't many who could write annotations in a book. Fujio curled up her thin lips playfully. The Almighty had hidden himself quite well. No wonder they all said that young Master Qin was someone the entire Northeast province couldn't afford to offend. If the police had someone like the Almighty, it would be hard for her to hide herself. Criminal psychology, psychological profiler, and computer expert. Fujio always believed that there were some people in this world who couldn't be compared to them no matter how many times they were reborn. The Almighty might be one of those people. Interested in my book? Qin Mo had already changed his clothes. He was wearing a light-colored knitted sweater with a pair of cloth trousers. It made him look much softer, like those male celebrities in Country H at home. His black hair was stuck to his ears, and it was slightly damp. His exposed wrists looked especially white. He walked around Fujio's back and put his slender fingers on the book Criminal Psychology she was reading. The light scent of mint mixed with a hint of tobacco fell from the top of Fujio's head. It was very familiar and very pleasant. In that position, when Fujio turned her head back, she saw the man's smooth chin. Fujio thought about his height again. She wasn't short, but the man was a whole head taller than her. No wonder the Almighty looked at her so disdainfully when he walked in. He was so tall that he indeed had the right to disdain her. Chinemo also lowered his eyes. His deep eyes fell on the young man's face, and they seemed to freeze for a moment. Soon he took the book out of her hands and put it back on the shelf. He grabbed the back collar of the young man's school uniform with his other hand, and turned his body sideways to ask Fujio. His thin lips were very close to the young man's face, and his breath could hit Fujio's face. "Do I look good?" "Not bad." Fujio smiled lightly, and it was somewhat seductive. "No wonder Brother Emo could locate my range so quickly. Your deduction ability is so strong. If I knew this earlier, I wouldn't have jumped out so quickly. I would have played a few more rounds with Brother Emo." Chinemo told himself once again that the young man was in his rebellious phase. As an older brother, even if this guy touched his things, he wouldn't. He couldn't break his claws. However, he still had to take care of this child. Chinemo exerted his strength. He didn't care what position the youngster was in and dragged him out. "You can read the extracurricular books later. Let's go eat first." Ever since she met the Almighty, the number of times she was treated like a sack had increased. "Fujio. Brother Emo, let's talk. Don't always drag me around like this. It's affecting my image." "Won't it affect your image to read other people's books?" Chinemo grabbed onto the youngster, as though he was lecturing a disobedient cat. Fujio didn't deny it. "I just want to see how powerful the person who caught me is. Brother Emo, what else do you do besides playing games?" "Make money." After Chinemo finished speaking, he pinched the youngster's chin forcefully. "Don't ask so much. If you continue with your nonsense, I'll cook you up and stew you in hot pot." Chapter 126. I don't need to chase after a girlfriend. Women will naturally chase after me. Chinmo's voice was very calm, and he lowered his handsome face. Even his breath was on Fujio's lips. "So what you said is not within my consideration. Be good and listen to me. Don't let me break your neck. That's what you need to do, understand?" After saying this, Chinemo let go of the youngster. His back was straight, and even seemed to be matter-of-factly. Fujio found it hard to refute what the Almighty said. According to the man's style, he didn't need to worry about finding a girlfriend. In Jiang City, not only girls who played games worshipped him as a god. Even young ladies who didn't play games couldn't resist the temptation of the Qin family's power and influence. And even if all these things were thrown out, with the Almighty's figure and looks, even if he went to a nightclub, he would still be a popular cowherd. In the future, she shouldn't attack the Almighty with girlfriends, because she couldn't do it at all. Unlike the Almighty who attacked her grades, every attack was accurate. Thinking of this, Fujio was a little depressed. She was going to comfort herself with hot beef hot pot later. But what she didn't expect was that after she sat down, there was a set of chopsticks and bowls on the table. That seat was placed in front of the man. Fujio looked up at Aunt Zhang with a light smile. That clean and handsome face was full of sunshine. Aunt Zhang didn't dare to make eye contact with this handsome boy. She just kept tilting her head and looking at Chinemo, looking like she wanted to say something but didn't. Seeing this, Fujio knew that the Almighty had ordered her to do something. She didn't beat around the bush and said to Chinemo, "Brother Emo, where are my chopsticks?" The beef in the spicy pot was boiling. At this time, she took it out and stuffed a big mouthful into her mouth. Even her lips and teeth were fragrant. Just thinking about it made her feel delicious. Chinemo only lifted his eyes slightly, and put a pile of beef into his bowl with his chopsticks. "This brother of mine is so bad, so of course I'll eat it. You watch." Fujio. "Almighty, you can't be so cruel. You won't have any friends, do you know that?" Chinemo glanced at him again, only to see the youngster's handsome face collapse instantly. His beautiful eyes were still looking at him, his silver hair fluttering innocently. This reminded him of the youth's rebellious phase, and he began to reflect on whether he had gone too far. After all, this was the youth's first visit. "Are you craving beef?" Chinemo asked the person opposite him. Fujio held her chin and licked her lower lip with the tip of her tongue, looking devilishly handsome. "Brother Emo, I've been playing tennis with you for so long, I'm hungry. When you were playing tennis with me, how many people did you flirt with? Have you counted?" Chinemo smiled, but it wasn't warm. I spent a third of my time teaching others. Fujio paused and stood up all of a sudden. She put her arm on the table and leaned over. Her thin lips curled into a smile. Jealous? Jealous? Chinmo's body temperature dropped even further. He held the bamboo chopsticks in his hand and used his eyes to signal the youngster to look at the bottom of the pot. You want to become it again? Chapter 127. Chinmo could tell that the young man was listless again. His deep eyes glanced at Fujio's lowered head, and the corner of his mouth lifted. He acted like a big brother. Will you still have puppy love in the future? Fujio shook her head and felt that something was wrong. When did she have puppy love? She was just flirting with a girl. She wanted to look up and explain, but she didn't expect that as soon as she opened her mouth, the man stuffed a mouthful of tender beef into it. After the beef cooled down, it wasn't too hot, and it tasted just right. The man was still holding the bamboo chopsticks in his hand, but the other end of the chopsticks was fed to the young man. After seeing this scene, not only Aunt Zhang, who was standing next to them, opened her mouth wide, but even the soldiers standing guard all looked at each other in disbelief. What was going on? Young master he actually knew how to feed people. Aunt Zhang still remembered that when the young master was about 8 years old, he was sitting in the courtyard reading a book. At such a young age, he was already very much like a gentleman. He wore a pure black suit with a fluffy windbreaker over it. He always had a cup of tea by his hand, and everyone in the courtyard would turn to look at him. Madame was also very happy at that time, and she wanted to feed the young master a bite of fruit. At first, the young master didn't say anything. He probably thought that Madame was tired of coaxing him. Only then did the young master put down the book calmly, and said to his wife with a dignified expression, "Mother, saliva spreads germs more than 10 times faster than normal breathing. It's common sense not to feed other people with your own toothpicks." This scene was still replaying in Aunt Zhang's mind until now. How could a child who was less than 10 years old talk about the spread of germs to his own mother? That kind of scene was really cute and surprising. Later on, whenever Aunt Zhang cooked something, her first thought was whether the food was clean or not. After all, their young master's obsession with cleanliness was real. But when did such a young master feed people with his own chopsticks? Didn't they say germs could spread? Now the young master didn't care about germs? If Madame saw this scene, she would definitely lose her elegance. Fujio didn't think much of it. Nothing was better than having meat to eat. In an instant, he tossed aside the question of puppy love. Chinmo looked at the youngster's handsome smile and didn't say anything else. Since he was the younger brother that he recognized, of course, he had to raise him carefully. He should have realized his own problem by now. If she was no longer in love, it meant that she was still obedient to him. Compared to those who ran amok all day long, this was much better. Moreover, the way the young man ate was also very appetizing. The more he looked at it, the more it looked like a cat that he raised. As long as it was fed, it would be obedient. He would observe it for a while. After all, it was the rebellious phase of youth. After telling himself this, Chinmo ate a few mouthfuls of beef with the same pair of bamboo chopsticks. This shocked Aunt Zhang once again. She took out the spare pair of bamboo chopsticks in her hand and didn't use it. She felt that this day was like a fantasy from beginning to end. But at the same time, she felt happy for her young master. After all, this was the first time she saw the young master being so close to someone. This kind of young master was finally a little more humane. Chapter 128. After eating the hot pot, Fujio was very satisfied. Just as she was about to say goodbye to the Almighty in a cool manner, she heard the man say slowly, "I've asked someone to prepare the physics books. The tutoring starts today." Fujio had a natural aversion to physics. She supported her chin with her fingers and smiled like a playboy. "Rushing like this will affect your learning efficiency. In less than 7 days, your school's monthly exams will start. Do you think you can pass physics with your poor grades if you don't rush the tutoring?" Chinmo took the pen. His side profile was still handsome, and his voice was calm as if he was just stating a fact. But even so, our Lord Jiu still felt like she was being attacked. Fujio couldn't help but ask herself why she chose the almighty of all people to tutor her. Get up and follow me upstairs if you're full. Don't dawdle if you're a man. Chinemo was wearing a knitted sweater with one hand in his trouser pocket. He didn't look so oppressive, and because of this, Fujio didn't dare to flirt with him. The almighty was too pure and refined. If she wasn't careful, she would be swayed by his face. The ancient people said that femme fatale was not groundless. She was bewitched by his face. Focus. The two of them sat in front of the same desk. Apart from the physics textbooks, there were all kinds of data cables, economic magazines, and the tablet that the almighty often used, as well as psychological analysis tables. Fujio was more interested in the latter. Chinmo's slender fingers tapped on the desk as he flipped open the physics textbook with a calm expression. Fujio finally pulled her attention back. Almighty Chin's phone vibrated beside him. He didn't look at it immediately. Instead, he looked up and asked Fujio, "What don't you know?" Fujio's fingers were still twirling around her silver hair. After hearing this question, she froze again. Then she looked at Chinemo seriously and said, "I don't know anything." Chinmo's hand paused as he turned his head to look at the young man who was still flirting with him and raised his eyebrows. "Are you proud?" Fujio touched her nose. "I didn't say I was proud." Start from the beginning. Chinmo's fingertips landed on one of the formulas. Remember this formula first, then. Fujio listened carefully. After all, this was the key to whether she could participate in the esports selection contest. This isn't right. Unexpectedly, Chinemo was exceptionally patient when it came to teaching. Perhaps all geniuses were like this. In their eyes, physics and chemistry were just some little tadpoles that they could play around with. During this period, Chinemo also received 2 calls, both of which were business-related matters. The almighty was multitasking and handled them beautifully. Someone seemed to have asked, "Boss Chin, what formula are you talking about? Speed? Density?" "I'm going to tutor my brother," Chinemo replied calmly. The other boss on the other side of the phone was shocked. He turned his head and asked his friend next to him, "When did CEO Chin have a younger brother? Which one of them is having a second child? That's not possible, right? Little brother?" His friend was also confused. The boss nodded. "That's right, it's his younger brother. He even said that he was tutoring his younger brother." Friends. Chapter 129. He lowered his head, and his warm breath blew behind Fujio's ear as he spoke. Fujio paused and looked up at the man's eyes, which were as deep as the sea. He said one last sentence, "I'm not going out today." Then he hung up the phone. When his eyelashes lowered, they cast a thick shadow on his face, making his side profile look exceptionally handsome. Fujio tilted her head to avoid this action. Chinemo didn't say anything else, and his eyes swept over the youngster's face. Write it again. It was really stressful to have such a master. Fujio moved the pen in her hand quickly, like a struggling cockroach. The almighty's presence was too strong, and no one could compare to him. But there was one good thing about him. The biggest difference between a genius and an ordinary person was that he could quickly get an accurate recognition. Fujio. The youngster looked at him handsomely with his white teeth biting his nose. Chinemo rubbed his temples with his slender fingers. "Physics is really not suitable for you. Brother Emo, let me tell you something. Don't you think physics is anti-humanity?" Fujio said seriously. Chinemo sneered. "I think you're the one who's inhumane when you were born." Fujio. "Can't we have a pleasant conversation?" "That's not going to work." Chinemo turned his fingers and pulled the physics book aside. "At this speed you won't pass in 7 days." Fujio agreed with the almighty for the first time. "I think so too. Take out your recent courses." Chinemo flipped through the magazine. Fujio looked at the physics book in her hand and decided to tell the truth. "You have to ask the teacher." Chinemo looked sideways at the youngster and said indifferently, "If I were your physics teacher, I'd throw you out right now." She didn't even know where she was studying. Fujio didn't feel guilty and asked curiously, "What do you do if you know the courses?" "Help you predict the questions." The Almighty's careless words made Fujio realize the essential difference between a bad student and a top student. It turned out that a top student could predict the questions. This was unfair to poor students like them. What was the difference between this and knowing the answer before the exam? Fujio was still a little depressed when Chin-Emo stood up from his seat. What are you going to do? The Almighty decided to be merciful and let her rest? Chin-Emo glanced at the youngster. Call your director and ask about his progress. The Almighty didn't say anything, but for some reason, Fujio could see the helplessness in his eyes. Fujio thought to herself as she unwrapped a lollipop and put it in her mouth. Then, she lowered her head to look at the series of formulas. She was so handsome. The physics formula was so ugly. It was obvious that physics was more anti-benevolent. When the director of Jiang City No. 1 Middle School received Chin-Mo's call, he was stunned. He couldn't believe his ears. When Chin-Emo said the second sentence, he straightened his back. Young Master Chin? Where was the physics in the worst class? I'll call the teacher now. Chapter 130. Director Wang didn't know why young Master Chin suddenly cared about the seating problem, so he just said respectfully, yes. Director Quan, don't you think that it's easy to have a wrong feeling when a man and a woman sit together at the same table? Chin-Mo's slender fingers were still holding the mineral water bottle. The reflection of his eyes on the bottle was like the water inside, with a slight coolness. Chief Wang was dumbfounded. Wrong feelings? Puppy love. After Chin-Emo said these two words, Director Quan immediately understood what Director Chin meant. Yes, young Master Chin is right. We, the directors, have sat together to discuss this problem. It must be changed to have a man and a woman sit together at the same table. Chin-Emo said faintly. Director Quan couldn't hear the emotion in it, so he asked nervously, Young Master Chin, do you know anyone in the bad class? Otherwise, according to young Master Chin's character, he would never ask about people in the school. Chin-Emo didn't speak this time, because the young man was looking up at him with his long and narrow eyes that were bright and beautiful. Fujio didn't know what Almighty Chin said, but she was thirsty, so she followed him over. Seeing the man still holding the phone in his hand, she raised her eyebrows. Brother Emo, can't you get the answer? Yes, I can. Chin-Emo handed the mineral water to the young man, and said faintly to the other side of the phone. That's it for now. Send me the course progress later. Almighty Chin didn't think there was anything wrong with what he did. As a big brother, there were some things that he had to stop and nip at the root. Since the young man liked to flirt with people so much, then he should keep him quiet and not get close to girls. However, it wasn't good for others to know about this, especially the young man. People in the rebellious stage of adolescence probably didn't want to be controlled like this. Thinking of this, Chin-Emo glanced at Fujio next to him. Fujio took the mineral water and drank a few mouthfuls. Her white neck and smooth chin always gave people a kind of indescribable beauty. As if aware of Chin-Mo's gaze, the young man turned his head. 2 or 3 strands of his silver hair stood up, and he winked at him with his left eye with a slight smile. Chin-Emo dragged him back to his seat. Once again, he felt that his actions were correct. This guy, he had to make him untouchable. Director Quan was even faster. As soon as he hung up, he called the physics teacher of the lower class. The first thing he asked was, Is there any student with the surname Chin among the students you teach? The physics teacher was also stunned by Director Quan's words. There is a boy whose surname is Chin. What does he look like? What about their living conditions? If they were young Master Chin's relatives, even if they were distant relatives, their families wouldn't be too bad. The physics teacher shook his head. He's a very ordinary student. He's slightly plump, and his family sells breakfast. That's not it. If it's not a distant relative, what else could it be? Could it be because of girls? Director Quan seemed to have come to a sudden realization. He sternly warned. In the future, this kind of table arrangement must be for the boys and the girls. Young Master Chin's girlfriend is definitely in there. That's why young Master Chin specifically called him. Chapter 131. Director Quan thought to himself. That was before. He didn't know that young Master Chin's girlfriend was among these girls. Otherwise, he wouldn't have said such a thing even if he was beaten to death. However, he still needed to have some manners when dealing with his subordinates. Teacher Zhang, this isn't being conservative. Director Quan thought of young Master Qin's words as he said, "It's true that boys and girls sitting at the same table can stimulate boys' learning attitude, but it is also easy for these children to have a wrong feeling. To prevent puppy love, we should start with the arrangement of tables." Physics teacher. "Okay, that's it. Just remember it," Director Quan said seriously. "How are your physics studies going recently? What are the key points? Send them to my email." After Qin Mo received the material, he only glanced at it a few times. Then he began to take the pen and mark the key points one by one, circling all the possible questions. What was even more amazing was that he found 4 questions from the big questions and tapped on them with his slender fingers. When you take the monthly test, you will be tested on one of these 4 questions. If you don't know how to do it, just write down the answers. Your memory should be good. Not bad. The young man smiled calmly with a lollipop in his mouth. In fact, every hacker had a good memory, especially when it came to data. If it weren't for the fact that Lord Jiu didn't like physics, she wouldn't have been so miserable and needed the Almighty to tutor her. However, this man was really amazing. He could get so many big questions right. Then he could just fill in the multiple choice questions in front, and he should be able to pass. When Fujio thought of this, she immediately became happy. She showed her white canine teeth. "Brother Mo, since you can control the scores, shouldn't we be dismissed now? You can control the scores?" Qin Mo raised his good-looking eyebrows. Fujio pointed at the test paper. "Here, here, and here. Altogether, it's enough to pass. How can a student taught by me, Qin Mo, only get a passing grade?" The man's tone was very indifferent, but he was naturally noble and domineering. Fujio. Why did she feel that letting a straight-A student like the Almighty teach her physics was simply a trap? A straight-A student's requirement for scores was not on the same level as a slacker like her. She just wanted to pass, not to become a physics enthusiast. But she had no choice. After all, she still needed the Almighty's help. If one were to think about it carefully, there would be benefits to it. Compared to being tortured by all kinds of formulas, she was more used to memorizing the questions. Thinking of this, Fujio began to nibble on her pen again, working hard. When it was almost 10:30, she scratched the back of her head and frowned. It was already so late. "Brother Mo, should we call it a day?" Qin Mo was still in a video conference. He paused it calmly and glanced sideways at the youngster with fluffy silver hair. His gaze was deep. "Sure." When Fujio heard this, she stretched her waist lazily and smiled devilishly. She packed her things and was about to leave. It shouldn't be hard to get a taxi home at 10:30. Chapter 132. She was going to wear it. When did she say she was going to wear pajamas? What's with the pajamas? She was the one who was going home. Fujio turned her head and looked at the man's sexy and handsome face. She raised her eyebrows. "Brother Mo, I think we have a fundamental problem with our communication. It's too late. Uncle Zhang isn't here. It's not safe for you to go back alone." Qin Mo's voice was very calm. He crossed his long legs and sat back on the sofa. "There are so many guest rooms. Just pick one to sleep in." Fujio curled up her lips. "It's safe to take a taxi back. You want to take a taxi around here?" Qin Mo glanced at the young man, and threw Fujio's packed school bag back onto the wooden shelf. His indifferent tone was devoid of any emotion. Fortunately, this world sometimes looks at one's looks, not IQ. Fujio. The Almighty was attacking her again. However, the entire Chong and street didn't allow foreign cars to enter, so she really couldn't take a taxi. Fujio picked up her phone and said, "Then I'll call my chauffeur to pick me up." Hearing that, Qin Mo's left hand, which was holding the business tablet, paused for a moment. Then his eyes slowly narrowed, and there was an endless coldness in them. "Is it hard for you to sleep here?" Fujio stopped dialing. She felt that the Almighty was quite tired after tutoring her for 2 hours. She couldn't just leave after using him. At least, she had to find an excuse to leave. "If it was Saturday, I would have gone to bed." Today is Thursday, and I have to go to school tomorrow. I'm afraid I won't be able to sleep if we change places. Chinemo looked up at the young man. Then he picked up the tablet and stood up. He patted Fujio's left cheek lightly. When did you become a good student who attended classes on time? Don't find such a bluffing excuse. I'll go to the company tomorrow and take you to school on the way. Now go to Aunt Zhang's to get your pajamas. Or do you want to study one more question before going to bed? Fujio. Could this alternative of choosing one more question be called an alternative? Her chest was still bandaged. She was afraid that she would be exposed if she slept here. Fujio lowered her eyes, thinking about how to reject him. There was a knock on the door. Young master, 9th young master's pajamas are ready. It was Auntie Zhang. When she heard that the young man was going to stay at the Qin family, she was very surprised. Young master was becoming more and more humane. He even invited a friend to stay for the night. If Madame knew about such a major change, she would definitely ask for all the information about this 9th young master. In fact, even Aunt Zhang herself was curious. Which child of the Fu family was this? How could he get along so well with their young master? Chinemo retracted his hands from the youngster's face. Come in. Aunt Zhang held the pajamas with both hands, and she looked at Fujio with eyes full of kindness. Young Master Jio, I see that you are thinner than young master, so I brought you the clothes that young master wore in middle school. I hope young Master Jio doesn't mind. Fujio could reject the Almighty, but if she didn't accept the pajamas now, she would be hurting an old man's heart. He thought about He Honghua, then looked at Aunt Zhang's sparkling eyes. Our Lord Jio only hesitated for a moment. He was thinking about how to say something so that Aunt Zhang wouldn't be too disappointed. Chapter 133. Almost instantly, Fujio saw Aunt Zhang's eyes darken. She quickly reached out and smiled lightly, looking very handsome. How could I not be satisfied? Aunt Zhang's beef hot pot is so delicious. The clothes you prepared must be comfortable to wear. Aunt Zhang's face brightened up again after being praised by the young man. She even blushed inexplicably. Young Master Jio was too gentle, completely different from their young master. Fujio was planning to continue to confuse him. Chinemo interrupted the young man's words and said in a very calm voice, If you like Aunt Zhang, you can sleep here tonight. Fujio. The Almighty was tricking her again. Ah, young Master Jio is not staying here tonight? Aunt Zhang looked at the handsome young man in front of her and said rather disappointedly, I even cooked supper for 9th young master. It's congee with pork and century eggs. Young master doesn't usually eat such things. Now that there's finally someone to eat it. Fujio thought about it carefully. The bathroom and bedroom were both independent, so even if she stayed here, as long as they were in different rooms, no one would find out. At this point, if she refused again, the Almighty, who was a master detective who dabbled in psychology, might even suspect her. The main thing was that she couldn't bear to see a woman who was good to her sad, especially a woman like Aunt Zhang. Of course I'm staying here. Fujio curled her lips like a rich young master. She reached out with her left hand for the pajamas and tucked Aunt Zhang's hair behind her ears. I love food so much, so how could I let go of Aunt Zhang's homemade century egg and lean meat porridge? Aunt Zhang heard this and was as happy as a child. I'll bring it to young Master Jio right now. Okay. No one could see the crying face of our Lord Jio. Staying here meant that she had to sleep the whole night with bandages. Any girl would know that it was torture. Seeing that he had achieved his goal, Chinemo turned around and continued his video conference. His fluent English was mixed with a few words of French. It was obvious that the conference was not a small one. It must have been hard on the Almighty, who could still find time to use Aunt Zhang to trick her in such a business conference. He was indeed a sly businessman. Fujio complained as she planned to change out of the pajamas while the Almighty was still in the conference. Otherwise, if something like what happened in the locker room happened again, it would be hard for her to deal with it. To prevent the Almighty from tricking her again, Fujio went downstairs to confirm her room with Aunt Zhang and familiarize herself with the environment. Different beds meant a higher degree of safety. There didn't seem to be anything to worry about. With this thought in mind, Fujio took out her modified laptop and entered the game leisurely. As soon as she logged into her account, she saw that someone had sent her over 100 friend requests. Fujio opened the page, and it was all awarding you a slap of pleasure. Idol, why didn't you add me? Idol hero is too much. How dare he say that I maliciously harass players? I only sent you 100 messages. I was going to send you 1,000. I have money in the game. Idol, didn't you say you were going to carry me through dungeons and send me flying? Why haven't you appeared yet? Idol, why aren't you playing? Have you been kidnapped by the Almighty? Chapter 134. Fujio put a lollipop in her mouth, put the notebook on her long legs, and began to reply. The Almighty didn't kidnap me. I successfully moved into his house. She couldn't afford to lose on the battlefield, even though the Almighty did trick her. Live in the Almighty's house. Award a slap of pleasure sent a horrified emoji. Student Feng didn't expect that his idol would tell him such shocking news as soon as he appeared. Fujio wasn't good at lying, but since she had already bragged, she had to cover it up as much as possible. Otherwise, it wouldn't be good for her handsome and domineering image. What's so surprising about that? If I can let him sleep on my bed in the future, will you still jump up in excitement? Sleep. Sleep on the bed. Student Feng's face started to turn red again, and he said righteously, Idol, let's not talk about such a dirty topic, or we will be reported. Fujio was amused by the screen, and she was about to raise her hand to type. A tall and slender figure came down from behind her, and he said in a deep voice, If I can let him sleep on my bed in the future. Fujio's back stiffened when she heard that familiar and cold voice. The last thing she regretted in her life was that she didn't lock the door just now. Who knew that the Almighty would sneak in while she was playing games? He didn't even make a sound when he walked. Did he think he was a cat? Chin Emo sneered first, then turned his face to look at the young man in front of him. His eyes were as deep as the flowing water in the dark night. So you want to sleep on the same bed with me that much? It seems like there is no need to arrange another guest room for you. It's a waste of space. His expression didn't show any emotion, but it was enough to chill the air around them. Fujio coughed lightly. This is a misunderstanding. Really? Chin Emo raised his eyebrows and took the young man's notebook. He put his fingertips on it, and he said casually and lazily, This kind of misunderstanding is really rare. It's the same reason why you got last place in your exams. Fujio. Every verbal attack was so technical. Seriously. How did the Almighty develop this habit? What's so great about being a top student? In the future, don't add people in the game, even teammates. It will affect your intelligence. Chin Emo said faintly as he operated the youngster's account. Naturally, he kicked awarding you a slap of pleasure out of Spadesy's friend list. Then he moved his mouse and took a screenshot to send to the game staff, specifically complaining about Student Feng. Fujio was caught off guard as she watched the Almighty's fluid movements. She thought that baby Feng was going to go crazy this time. Student Feng was indeed angry. Was he bullying him for being rich? He had only chatted with his idol for a few days. He hadn't even given him a gold diamond yet. He hadn't done anything. Why did she say that he was harassing her? No, he had to find out who had complained about him. Therefore, after using some connections, he decisively went to privately poke the staff of the game. He wouldn't have known if he hadn't investigated, but now that he did, he was even sadder. The person who reported him was actually his idol himself. Not only did he report me, he even blacklisted me. Why? Student Feng was deflated. He sat in front of the computer and felt wronged. He sent a crying emoji to Spadesy. Idol, even if you want to report me, you can't blacklist me. Chapter 135. The man's indifferent voice didn't reveal any emotion. To prevent you from spouting nonsense, you can use my account and I'll use yours before the esports selection contest. Fujio smiled lightly. Brother Emo, that's not a good idea. We use different skills in the game. As a hacker, can't you control different skills in the game? He handed the youngster a towel. Don't put my IQ on the same level as yours. Write down your account number and wash your claws. Or do you prefer me to wash them for you? Chin Mo's smile turned colder, His eyes filled with nobility as he handed the youngster a towel. Fujio just remembered that she hadn't showered yet. She couldn't care less about comforting baby Feng in the game. She took the bath towel from the Almighty's hand and rushed into the bathroom. This time, she didn't forget to lock the door, and she even locked it twice. Fujio completely believed that the Almighty would rip people's clothes when he was shameless. It was better for her to take the safe route. Thinking of this, Fujio raised her eyes and looked at herself in the mirror. She was so handsome, but she was still threatened. Chin Mo seemed to notice the depression of the young man in the bathroom, so he stood up and walked slowly to the door. He put one hand in the waistband of his khaki pants, and he looked very cool. His voice was still indifferent, but it had a natural sense of command. You can use the game currency in the account, but you are not allowed to add people. Game currency? Fujio's long and narrow eyes lit up. She turned sideways and opened the door. She put her arms on the side and leaned closer to Chin Mo. Her handsome face was full of evil smile. Brother Mo, don't worry. I have the basic ethics of using an account. For example, he didn't expect the youngster to open the door. Looking at the person in front of him, his silver hair was wet. He freed one hand and pushed Fujio back. Take a good shower. Fujio didn't know what to say. Instead, she pushed him back. This time, Fujio didn't care how cold the Almighty's tone was. She smiled brightly, locked the door again, and started to take off her clothes. But when she was halfway through, she still felt a little awkward. She could sense that Chin Mo hadn't left. He was sitting on the sofa outside the bathroom. It seemed like he was still in a meeting. Even without the sound of water, she could still hear him speaking in English and French. It wasn't easy to remove the outer layer, only the inner bandage remained. Fujio glanced at herself and sat on the edge of the bathtub. She stretched out her long legs and bent one of them to the left. She turned her face to the side and carefully unwrapped the white cloth in front of her chest bit by bit. As she moved, her silver hair drooped down and hit the attractive side of her face. It made her look very handsome, like a beautiful young man full of vitality. But at this moment, if Chin Mo came in, he would definitely find out that the younger brother he recognized wasn't a younger brother, but a younger sister. Fujio, the legendary gay who liked men. In fact, she was always straight. But no one could have imagined that she was a girl. Because he needed to continue using the strip of cloth after he took a shower, he couldn't let it get wet, nor could he tear it. Finally, the last layer was opened by her, and the pair of pure white jade rabbits were about to jump out. There was a sudden knock on the door behind her. Chapter 136. Almost in the next second, she picked up her shirt and put it in front of her. However, Chin Mo didn't come in. He just stood outside the door, his side profile elegant and handsome. He had a pile of common toiletries in his hands. Open the door, I have something for you. Why did he have to give it to her now? Fujio pressed her shirt and said, I'll take it after I take a shower. There's no shower gel in there. How are you going to shower? Chin Mo raised his eyebrows and said in a deep voice, Open the door and take what Auntie Zhang prepared for you. After he said that, Chin Mo saw that there was no movement inside. His slender fingers were on the doorknob, and just as he was about to turn the lock, the wooden door in front of him opened a little, and the young man poked his head out. He didn't seem to be wearing any clothes. His white neck and delicate collarbones were exposed, and only his handsome face could be seen. Behind him was the special mist of the bathroom, and even the young man's thick black eyelashes were steaming. Brother Mo, where are the things? Fujio said it naturally with a slight smile on her lips. Chin Mo glanced at the young man's smooth collarbones, then looked away and threw a bag of toiletries to him. Fujio raised her hand to catch it and whistled. Chin Mo didn't know what to do with this guy who was flirting all the time, so he simply closed the door and locked the young man inside. Out of sight, out of mind. Fujio finally let out a sigh of relief. If the door was opened a little more, she would definitely be discovered. Exposing herself like this would make the Almighty impatient, but it was better than coming in directly. Fujio thought of this and looked at the shower gel in her hands. Then she raised her right hand and finally took off the last layer of the white tape. The person in the bronze mirror in the bathroom changed from a handsome and devilish young man to an extremely beautiful girl. She had the same silver hair, but because of the pair of jade rabbits in front of her chest, Fujio's face looked even more alluring. Her figure was very good. She had long legs and a slender waist. Her back was pulled back, and one could vaguely see her flat abdomen. There was a rather deep waistline. Her jade rabbit was also very white and tender. Standing in the misty bathroom, the curve was very obvious. In fact, because it was too full, it gave people the urge to rub it. Fujio lay in the bathtub and closed her eyes, letting the water drip down onto her fair and handsome face. Her long eyelashes cast a shadow under her eyelids, and together with her silver gray hair by her ears, there was an indescribable sense of beauty to her. If Almighty Qin saw her like this, Fujio had a feeling that the Almighty wouldn't let her off easily. But fortunately, she had developed well. She didn't let the white cloth wrap around her. But of her body, she didn't of him. She was in the second half of the semester now, and she had already started puberty. She didn't know if the white cloth would still work when spring came next year. Fujio tilted her head. It seemed that sometimes being too big could be a source of trouble. She had to be more careful when she went out later. She had seen the pajamas just now, and they weren't very safe. She was afraid that even with the white cloth, there would still be a little bulge. Thinking of this, Fujio suddenly opened her eyes and pressed her silver hair with her left hand. Her action was still very handsome. Chapter 137. Qin Mo's attention was still on the business meeting. On his left was a transparent cup filled with water. On the other side of the meeting, Manager Feng felt very strange. CEO Qin's state today was obviously a little absent-minded. Regarding the esports selection contest, I have a new idea. Qin Mo opened his mouth after the business partner had finished speaking. With his Bluetooth earpiece on, he always looked more commercial and aesthetic than most people. Since we are looking for the most valuable new member, we can give up on the previous internal candidates and let them compete again. Give up on the predetermined candidate? The managers of the Qin's club looked at each other in dismay. Qin Mo's partner was a European. He lifted his lips and smiled helplessly. But Qin, you were the one who came up with the plan. That was the previous Qin group, not the Qin group that I took over. Qin Mo's voice was indifferent. Even in front of a business partner, he was calm and professional. Talents can never be selected through internal selection. I believe Robert has heard of this saying, mastermind in civil, the master is among the people. Hearing this, Robert's eyes lit up. He shrugged his shoulders and said, All right, Qin, you have successfully convinced me once again. With you around, the Qin family is indeed a treasured sword. Qin Mo slit his fingers. He didn't deny it, nor did he act humble. Thank you. Qin, I like your personality. Robert laughed. I heard that you've started playing on a private server recently, and he even went to a live stream room? Our teams are all very concerned about who had the ability to make you pay attention to a small stream. Qin Mo's expression didn't change at all. He tilted his head and lit a cigarette, holding it between his slender fingers. He looked noble and upper class. It's not a matter of ability. That's my brother. Brother? Robert expressed his surprise. Secretary Liang was in charge of meeting minutes. Usually he would sit in on these international meetings. But after hearing the word younger brother, Secretary Liang felt a little uncomfortable. President Qin, didn't you say he wasn't your biological brother? Why do you have such a doting tone even in a meeting? Robert was still asking. Qin, when did you have a younger brother? I remember that you're the only one in the Qin Corporation, right? God brother, all right, let's not talk about this anymore. He's still bathing. Qin Mo glanced up and glanced at the clock on the wall. I'm going to check on that guy. That's all, good night. Robert was extremely curious. In his impression, Qin was someone who was hard to get close to. She really didn't expect that man to treat her brother so well. In the past, he did not like Chinese people because some Chinese people would neglect their families when they had business. Now, looking at Qin's appearance, he was even more certain that he would cooperate with the Qin Corporation to the end. The members of the club didn't have much of a reaction when they saw that. Secretary Liang, on the other hand, felt a headache coming on. The CEO had only known the young master of the Fu family for a few days, and he was already bringing him home for a shower. No, he couldn't let his imagination run wild. The CEO must have found a companion because he had been living alone for too long. But even if he wanted to find someone, he should find a woman, right? Chapter 138. Secretary Liang was really in a dilemma. Should he call Madam or his boss? But what should he say if he called them? He couldn't say that Boss Qin was turned gay by a man, right? Different from Secretary Liang's active thoughts, Fengshang, on the other side of the game, only thought that he was the most pathetic person in the world. So when his brother knocked on the door and came in, he didn't put away his laptop. He looked depressed and haggard. Manager Feng thought that his brother didn't have enough money in the game, so he immediately added 3,000 yuan into the account and asked, "Is it enough?" "No, it's not about the money." Even though Feng Shang stuttered, he still felt that today's incident was very sad. Feng Yi raised his eyebrows. "Then what is it?" Feng Shang was just about to tell his brother that he knew Spadesy, but on second thought, if his brother knew about this, he would definitely know that he had participated in the internal signing that day. Thus, he just shook his head and didn't say anything. Feng Yi, on the other hand, wanted to complain to his brother. "I'm going to be very busy from now on. I don't know what's going on with CEO Qin, but he suddenly canceled all the internal signings eligibility to join the team. If they want to join the team, they'll have to participate in this year's esports selection contest. I have to rearrange the plan, and I won't be able to go on a date at the nightclub in the future." I don't know. In fact, Feng Shang knew. He always felt that Almighty Qin's decision was to stand up for his idol no matter how he looked at it. Could it be that his idol was really taken away by the Almighty? The more Feng Shang thought about it, the more depressed he felt. He wanted to raise his idol, but why did Almighty Qin beat him to it? Fujio didn't know that someone wanted to raise her. She held a towel in her left hand and casually wiped her short silver hair. She walked out of the bathroom barefooted. The ends of her hair were still dripping water, and the water fell on her pale lips. Her skin was white and supple, and it was as clear as jade. From the bridge of her nose to her chin, she was impeccably beautiful. She was so clean that people couldn't help but take a second look. The young man had a lollipop in his mouth as he slowly walked toward Qin Mo. That lazy look made him look like a demon deacon in a comic, very handsome. After the bath, the youngster seemed to have become even more eye-catching. With such an eye-catching person around, Qin Mo couldn't continue with his work. He closed all the documents and placed the tablet at the side. He glanced up at the youngster and looked into his eyes. He raised his right hand. "Give me the towel." Fujio didn't resist the Almighty at this moment. After all, she was wearing pajamas. Her goal was to protect her front, so she handed the towel to the man. Qin Mo shook off the water droplets that landed on the back of his hand, his voice calm. "Lower your head." Fujio lifted the corner of her lips. The Almighty wanted to wipe her hair? Coincidentally, it wasn't convenient for her to wipe it herself, so she just handed it over to the Almighty. That way, she wouldn't expose herself if too many water droplets dripped onto the front. Thinking of this, Fujio leaned over obediently. Qin Mo looked at the furry head in front of him. He raised his right hand, but it wasn't a gentle one. After all, Almighty Qin believed that he should treat his younger brother the same way he treated his younger brother. A boy didn't need to be gentle with him. Chapter 139. When Aunt Zhang came in with the supper, she saw this scene. She almost dropped the bowl of pork and century egg congee in her hands. The young master in front of her didn't seem like the young master she knew. The young master in the past was cold and indifferent, as if everything was in his hands, and nothing could arouse his interest. Could it be that the young master had been alone since he was young, and now that he had a friend, he was like this? Aunt Zhang thought about it, and decided to call Madam tomorrow. It was too late today. She was afraid that if she told Madam, she would be too excited to sleep. Qin Mo also saw Aunt Zhang standing at the door. He retracted his hand and said in a calm tone, Okay, you can go eat the supper Aunt Zhang made for you. Hearing that, Fujio was even happier. She raised her fluffy head and smiled at Aunt Zhang. Thank you, Aunt Zhang. Aunt Zhang quickly waved her hands. Seeing that the young man didn't care about the heat and took a sip of her porridge, she was also happy. She put a big bowl of porridge in front of him. Fujio didn't worry at all that she couldn't finish it. The best thing in life was to have hot meat porridge after physics class at 11 o'clock at night. Especially in Jiang City, the weather at the end of autumn was starting to get cold. There were layers and layers of fog outside, so eating something warmed up the stomach. Moreover, she could splurge in the game while eating. Most importantly, she was very interested in how much money the Almighty had in his account. Based on the Almighty's attitude when he gave her something last time, he definitely had a lot of money. Fujio logged into the account the Almighty gave her while eating the porridge. She opened the account's information list in high spirits. 1 0, 2 zeros, 3 zeros, 8 zeros, 9 zeros. 9 zeros in virtual game currency, even if converted into RMB, would be worth more than 1 million. Fujio looked sideways at the account the Almighty had logged into, and it only had a few thousand yuan. Was this the difference between a top student and a bad student? Fujio lowered her head and bit the spoon in her mouth. Unfair. She had to find a way to earn more money. Fujio thought of this and seemed to remember something. Right, baby phone. Fujio opened the page and saw awarding you a slap of pleasure, flirting with girls in the world channel. Based on what he said, Fujio locked onto Fengshang's exact location and sent him a message. Are you there? After Fengshang sent his brother away, he sat down and saw Almighty Qin talking to him in the game. He choked on his saliva and couldn't help but cough. Could it be a fake account? This was Fengshang's first reaction. What's more, student Feng was still thinking, this fake account was practically knocking on his gun's muzzle. He had to teach him a lesson. Wait a minute, there was a ranking above that person's head, and above it were 2 domineering symbols. Supreme Alliance. Student Feng couldn't be more familiar with this symbol. The team under the Qin Corporation Club. Was it really Almighty Qin talking to him? Fengshang felt shocked. His first reaction wasn't to reply to Qin Mo in the game. Instead, he clicked on Spadesy's username and sent a string of messages to verify it. Idle. Almighty Qin actually asked if I was there? How should I answer him? Chapter 140. As expected, this fellow did not look at him. He would do something flirtatious. Qin Mo's gaze turned cold. It was as though there were countless clouds churning in his eyes. No one could see what was hidden in those clouds. It was just that the aura around him had clearly become colder. Fujio didn't know that the Almighty had his eyes on her. She bit her spoon with her white teeth, emptied her hands and typed beautifully. Baby Feng, what are you doing? Why didn't you reply me? Fengshang's expression changed, and he immediately sent a screenshot to Spadesy. Look, the Almighty even called me Baby Feng. Idle, do you think the Almighty, is he secretly in love with me? Qin Mo frowned. He almost crushed the custom-made mouse in his right hand and threw it away. However, there was no trace of anger on his face. Instead, his eyes were extremely cold and the corners of his mouth curled up. It wasn't very warm. Everyone in the industry knew that Qin Mo was the scariest when he was in this state. There were many second-generation officials in the military compound, but none of them were like Qin Mo. He was skilled and ruthless. He had been like this since he was young. Qin Mo didn't reply. Instead, he reached for the glass of water beside him, crossed his long legs, and took a sip of water as if he was watching a show. The curve of his chin made him look like a young master of a warlord during the Republic of China, cold and noble. Fujio waited for a while, and saw that the other side was obviously online, but he didn't reply to her message, so she typed a string of words to Fengshang. Baby Feng, it's me Fujio. I'm using the Almighty's account. Fengshang was still thinking that other than his idol, even if Almighty Qin confessed to him, he would decisively blacklist him. He didn't expect to see such a sentence when he opened the message. Fengshang was stunned. Then what about the idol's account? Of course it's the Almighty who's using it. Also, I have to clear my name. The person who blacklisted you and complained about you was also the Almighty. Fujio thought that she could finally trick the Almighty for once. She typed happily. He has been using my account since the beginning. When Fengxiang saw this, he turned back to look at his conversation with Spadesy. He was on the verge of tears. He typed without stuttering. Idol. Why did you give your account to the Almighty? This is bad. Miserable. Fujio didn't understand. What's so miserable about it? Fengxiang felt that he couldn't explain it in such a short time, so he sent a screenshot of the chat to Fujio. Fujio was happily eating her porridge. After all, she was now using the Almighty's account, and she was a real rich person in the game. Her 9 digits in profile data was not a lie. Later, she would ask Fengxiang to cooperate with her to take on a big mission to clear a dungeon. This time, she would raise the price a bit higher and get some fresh blood. Otherwise, it would be a waste of the virtual currency in the Almighty's account. However, the moment she curled her thin lips and clicked on the message, all her beautiful plans came to an abrupt halt and disappeared at lightning speed. Chapter 141. Baby Feng. Qin Mo opened his mouth. His voice was so low that anyone who heard it would know that he wasn't in a good mood. Fujio explained with a smile. That's just a nickname that won't make people feel too distant. Hearing that, Qin Mo tilted his head and curled up his thin lips. He was very cold. So intimate that people will think that I'm secretly in love with him? This is definitely Baby Feng's problem. He is a person who thinks too much. Fujio looked very serious. Qin Mo curled up his thin lips coldly. Obviously, he wasn't satisfied with this excuse. He pinched Fujio's chin and used all his strength with his fingers. His handsome face got closer and he reminded the young man in a low voice. If I find out that you flirt with people on my account again, you won't be able to sleep tonight. Fujio could sense the danger emanating from this man, which was different from the previous few times. However, Qin Mo didn't make things difficult for her. He only complained about Fengxiang again after the warning. When a user was complained about, they would be banned for 10 minutes. Today, Baby Feng had been complained about so many times. This was no different from being locked in a small dark room. Fujio was thinking about this when Qin Mo said, "You should be glad that he is your teammate in the upcoming esports selection contest. Otherwise, he won't be able to use this account anymore." Fujio absolutely believed in the Almighty's power in the game, so she silently lit a candle for Baby Feng. Fengxiang also received the news of being complained about. He was a chatterbox in the game, and it was terrible to be silenced like this. The main thing was that he didn't know what was going on with his idol and young Master Qin. Young Master Qin wouldn't punish his idol on the spot after seeing the content just now, right? However, there was one thing that Fengxiang noticed. Young Master Qin actually gave his account to someone else. That game account was worth more than a few 100,000 yuan. Back then, before young Master Qin became a professional team, someone offered 100,000 yuan to buy his account. That person didn't expect that the account he wanted to buy would be played by the powerful young Master Qin of Jiang City. Not only did he offend young Master Qin, but he never showed his face in the game again. In young Master Qin's words, even if he didn't want what he used, he would seal it and not give it to anyone else. But now, young Master Qin had actually given that account to his idol, and he had handed it over for such a long time. If this matter were to be known by his big brother, it would definitely cause a huge storm. Fengxiang was thinking that he would also exchange accounts with his idol in the future. He couldn't fall behind young Master Qin in everything. Fujio didn't think too much about it. She just wanted to bring Fengxiang to a dungeon this time. She had never seen Fengxiang operate before. She would be able to understand everything once she went through the dungeon. Then she would be able to make adjustments to the entire team based on what she knew. "Brother Mo, do you want to run a dungeon with me?" Fujio tilted her head and asked Qin Mo. Her silver hair looked exceptionally soft under the light. From Almighty Qin's point of view, this was the young man's way of admitting his mistake. The coldness in his eyes finally subsided a little, and he nodded slightly. Then he moved his mouse and sent a message to Fujio's side based on their intimacy level. Chapter 142. In the past, whenever Fengshang saw the game name Spadesy, he would be very, very happy. But today when he entered the dungeon, he couldn't wait to avoid that name. Perhaps it was because he had seen young Master Qin in person, but student Fengshang felt that the game character standing in front of him was like young Master Qin himself. Dressed in an ancient fur cloak, he looked like a character from a comic book. He had the ability to freeze, and just by standing there, he could make the air around him turn cold. Fengshang swallowed his saliva with difficulty and leaned closer to Fujio. The team that sent out the invitation didn't expect that Almighty Qin himself would accept their invitation. And he even brought 2 people into the team. Spadesy was no stranger to them, and the main thing was that there was awarding you a slap of pleasure, a very famous pay-to-win player. For a moment, they couldn't bear to look at those 3 people. One had to know that every single one of them was famous and powerful. Let's not talk about Almighty Qin and Spadesy. Even awarding you a slap of pleasure was very well known in the game, and you could see him on the rich list every day. The strange thing was that this person would always flood the screen when he entered a dungeon, and he would be even more unrestrained when he saw a pretty girl. Why was it so quiet this time? While the rest of the players were still wondering, Fujio had already started commanding. Compared to her low-level account, the Almighty had a fully equipped main account, so it wasn't too easy for him to clear the dungeon. He went all the way up, killing everything in his path. But Spadesy's account didn't move at all. He didn't even make a move. It was useless. There was a female player in that team who wasn't good at playing, but at least she knew how to make a few moves. That Spadesy didn't even know how to use potions. If Almighty Qin hadn't brought him here, such a person would have been kicked out of the team. The more that female player saw Spadesy walking slowly, the more annoyed she felt. Why did Almighty Qin treat such a person differently? He obviously had no skills, but he followed behind the team and leached off experience, acting like he was a peerless master. It was so annoying. In the beginning, the female player was still holding it in. Later on, when she was unable to defend in time and lost more than half of her HP, she was completely enraged. On the other side of the computer, he sneered, and even his tone was cold and mocking. The most anticipated rookie king of Zone C, with amazing mechanics and fast hand speed, who was poached by the Qin Club with a large sum of money. Turns out he's just a weakling who only knows how to follow the Almighty to leech experience. He doesn't even know when the monsters are approaching, not to mention, from what I see, those first kills aren't necessarily taken by him. At the very least, he doesn't know how to save people. Teaming up with such a person, forget about first kills, he might not even be able to clear this dungeon. Hero was a game that could speak, which was why Hero was loved by so many professional teams. It could professionalize the game and attract people with its voice after becoming a god. The female player had turned on the voice chat. Although her voice was sweet, the sarcasm in her words was clearly uncomfortable. Chapter 143. So as soon as she said this, the game screen fell into a dead silence. Fujio was still holding a lollipop in her mouth. Her hand paused, and she sent out another big move. Her finger technique was very beautiful. The other players didn't react so quickly. But right at this moment, the biggest monster appeared, and it used a fireball-like special attack on their team. Not to mention the others, even a master like, awarding you a slap of pleasure, was caught off guard and lost half of his HP. Fortunately, he had good skills, and he could retreat instantly. The rest of the players weren't so lucky. They were directly knocked down to the ground, and they died very miserably. Logically speaking, when a team had 3 players left, and one of them was dying, it was impossible for them to win this round. But to everyone's surprise, Spadesy, who had been quiet all this time, turned his sword shadow and created a magnificent light behind Fujio. The light almost filled up the entire screen, and the dazzling silver color was so dazzling that people couldn't come back to their senses for a long time. Except for Fujio, who was protected by Almighty Qin. Her murderous aura didn't seem to diminish because of the death of the others. Instead, under Almighty Qin's cover, she directly jumped up, and even her black battle robe had a silver glow as she used a killing blow. Under the dazzling special effects, People saw an unprecedented top-level cooperation. Handsome, unruly, and invincible. The whole team was stunned to see this scene, and from their eyes to their arms, they felt an unprecedented shock. That technique was clearly the 3000 knife cutting that Almighty Qin was best at. Why could Spadesy use Almighty Qin's unique skill? Who was the person controlling Spadesy right now? This was the question in everyone's heart. Apart from the question, they were also shocked. It was a boiling feeling that came from the depths of their blood. Although they had heard too many legends about Almighty Qin was now a god. He used a top-notch account, and no matter what tricks he used, there would always be a very small voice in people's hearts saying that Almighty Qin's strength was inseparable from the account he used. But now a new account. Since he had used the most difficult move, the 3000 knife cutting. Although the new account had the halo of the Rookie King, such an ultimate move would never be used by a veteran player who had not played the game since the hero was released. That was obviously Almighty Qin. Other than Almighty Qin, none of the teams in the country could use this killer move. Not only could it protect people, but it could also support attacks at the same time. The legendary 3000 saber slashes, 10,000 monsters retreat. The screen of the computer was still shining with silver light. The reflection in everyone's eyes made their pupils sway. Immediately after, they heard a loud boom coming from their earphones. The monster collapsed heavily, stirring up a layer of snow-like dust in the surroundings. At that moment, the names of Spadesy, Qin awarding you a slap of pleasure, and the others appeared on the front page of the entire server, hanging high up at the top. 3 times in a row, the first kill was completed. Chapter 144. The female player who had been making sarcastic remarks was dumbfounded. The hand holding the mouse was still trembling. The news of the team had already exploded. Everyone was talking about the ultimate move, 3000 knife cutting. After the silver light dissipated, the team members automatically resurrected. At this moment, Fujio moved and sent a string of words over. From the beginning of the dungeon, I told you to protect yourselves and not get killed by monsters. Even if Spadesy didn't save anyone, he didn't lose any HP. As for you, little Ripple, I was the one who picked you up. I'm the commander. If I don't say anything, don't move. You even went so far away to kill monsters. You don't even know this basic command. Is this your first time playing hero? The female player felt wronged by the accusation. She tried to defend herself, but the moment she opened her mouth, she pretended to be pitiful. I'm just afraid that the monsters over there will hurt you. Fujio raised her eyebrows. Okay, even if it's like what you said, and you're afraid that the monsters will hurt us, so you moved your position randomly. It doesn't matter that you lost HP, just return to the team as soon as possible. Why are you laughing at us? Do you know that because of those words of yours, we almost couldn't get through this? Little Ripple, I'm telling you, don't think you can escape unscathed after splashing dirty water on others in front of me. From now on, I won't accept any orders from any team that has Little Ripple in it. I won't take it either. After Fengshang said this, he directly spent money on the entire server. There were a total of 9 messages, and the entire screen was filled with the same message. Such a scene was really rare. Award A Slap of Pleasure made an announcement. Everyone listen up. In the future, if there's a team with rippling ripples, don't look for me. Just this one sentence had shaken the entire game. It wasn't just because awarding a slap of pleasure would never make an enemy out of anyone in the game, nor would he specifically reject anyone. It was also because of the 99 full-screen announcements. 100 yuan for a full server announcement. 99. This was simply throwing money away. Holy sh*t. So much money. Awarding you a punch of pleasure candy has always had a lot of money, alright? Tycoon. I just want to say that I want to be friends with you. Am I the only one who's concerned about why the Reward Student Association sent out such a message? I know. Insider information. Did everyone see the record-breaking first clear on the server? Almighty Qin and my big spade led everyone to victory. What about this little Ripple? She didn't listen to the command and lost her HP. She even mocked my big spade's poor operation and said that he didn't deserve the title of Rookie King. In the end, my big spade made a killing blow. Not only did he protect his teammates, but he also dealt a critical blow to the entire arena. This slap to the face was really embarrassing. What? Mocking my big spade? Do you think our haters are fake? In just an instant, thousands of people were stirred up. Even though Spadesy hadn't been here for a long time, he was just an ordinary player. He hadn't gone through any training, but he had crushed countless battlefields with his absolute skills. So Spadesy's reputation in Hero was real. Everyone admired Spadesy from the bottom of their hearts, no matter if it was the players who had been with Fujio in the dungeon, or those who had watched the livestream. Once the reason for Rippling Ripple's rejection was revealed, at least 3 team captains joined forces to voice their support. Chapter 145. Instantly. Server-wide bombardment. Because everyone knew that in Zone C, only these few teams were strong. If they wanted to clear a more complicated instance dungeon, they would have to bring them along. This was simply banning Little Ripple. Little Ripple really didn't understand this game. What was this? For a male account, they were going to reject a beauty like her? Little Ripple looked at the message on the screen that she had been kicked out of the team. She angrily threw her mouse, and her expression became extremely ugly. After hearing the noise, Fu Ximing, who was still practicing his hand speed, looked over and frowned. Sister, what's wrong? Little Rippling Ripple's original body was actually Fu Ximing's twin sister. Fu Shue's anger hadn't subsided yet. Her chest heaved up and down as she took a big gulp of water. Then she sneered. It's all because of that Spadesy. He thinks he's so great just because Almighty Qin is backing him up? Those otakus who play games also have a hole in their brains. Instead of protecting a beauty like me, they have to stand on the same side as a guy. They even want to jointly reject me? Ha, this is the funniest joke I've ever seen. Spadesy. When Fu Ximing heard this name, his fingers on the keyboard stopped moving. There was a hint of mockery in his eyes. That's Zone C's Rookie King? An unorthodox player? That's him. Fu Shui didn't care about the computer anymore. She turned around and said to Fu Ximing, his operation isn't bad, but his character is really unflattering. Fu Ximing said proudly, that's because he hasn't seen a professional before. A random player that popped out of nowhere wants to be called a king. What a joke. Fu Shui's lips curled up as well. You're right. If it was my younger brother, he would have beaten him so badly that he wouldn't even know which way is north. Such a small character is not worth my time. Fu Ximing lowered his eyes and said indifferently, my goal is the selection contest. Fu Shui winked mischievously. Yes, my genius brother definitely wouldn't be interested in such a person. But I heard that Spadesy will be participating as well, and he will be participating as a member of the He Corporation team. I really don't know where that fat village girl, He Honghua, found Spadesy. He won't participate, Fu Ximing said again. Fu Shui didn't understand. Why? You'll know when the time comes, Fu Ximing said as he logged into his game account. He already had a rough understanding of Spadesy. His mother even gave him a concrete plan. Ever since Spadesy appeared in Hero, he had been taking orders to make money. To put it bluntly, he was just a pauper. Such people were the easiest to deal with. Chapter 146. On the other side of the computer, Qin Mo looked at the verification information on the screen. His eyes were calm as he picked up the cup beside him and took a sip of purified water. He didn't reply right away. Fujio didn't know that Fu Ximing had taken a liking to her account. She was operating the Almighty's account and checking the equipment dropped by the boss just now. She had a handsome smile on her face. Brother Mo, we're quite lucky. Qin Mo casually replied with a before he started replying to the message. He didn't refuse. Instead, he gave Fu Ximing a specific price. But when Fu Ximing saw the price, his face turned green. He tapped his fingers heavily on the screen. 10 million. Spadesy. You're obviously asking for a lion's share. Qin Mo was still sitting like a business king, but his tone was indifferent. If you can't even fork out 10 million, why are you still running a company and talking about business? Because the other party's attitude was too indifferent, as if 10 million was just a small number. Fu Ximing's face turned red after he saw the message. Fu Ximing didn't know why, but at that moment, he remembered what happened in the tennis court today. That embarrassing feeling surged into Fu Ximing's heart again. He originally thought that spending 100,000 or so would be enough to settle the matter. After all, Spadesy loved money so much. Unexpectedly, Fu Ximing's eyes turned gloomy and he typed fiercely. It's better to have some self-awareness. You're already so poor in the game, and you don't even have a decent set of equipment, let alone in real life. Spadesy, I'm saving you some face by not saying it out loud. Since you don't want to cooperate with us, then we'll meet at the selection contest. I hope you still have the confidence to be so arrogant then. After that, Fu Ximing went offline and called his mom. Mom, it didn't work out. That Spadesy is just a pretentious guy. He even pretended to be rich in front of me, asking for 10 million. Mom, that's a new account. Even if he has a good record in the game, no one has seen how he operates in real life. Why do you have to buy his account for me to use? Ximing. The person on the other side of the phone lowered his voice, as if he was trying to avoid the music of the ball. He continued, Spadesy's account has attracted the attention of all the media in Jiang City. Do you know what this means? This meant that when the selection contest started, this Spadesy would become a headline in the esports news, and he would definitely become famous. He didn't know which expert had given he Honghua pointers behind the scenes for a village girl like her to be enlightened and play such a trick. But now no one knows who this Spadesy really is. Mom thought about it for a long time. And the best way is to buy this account and put it on you. Then you can participate as Spadesy. You have the title of a young genius, and with such a popular account, you will definitely become a god. Only then did Fu Ximing understand what his mother meant. He also became anxious. What should we do now? That load has already rejected me. Chapter 147. In Hero, Fujio was still distributing equipment to her teammates. She was very generous to those who supported her in the whole server. She shared all the diamonds that dropped from the first kill with the captains of all the major teams. Awarding you a slap of pleasure, got the best equipment. Fujio had to admit that she was being selfish in this aspect. After all, he was her future teammate. But the others didn't mind. After all, they weren't professional players, so they didn't need to collect materials. They liked more practical things like diamonds. They didn't care about the other things, so they naturally listened to Fujio's arrangements. To thank them, Fujio even gave them a 20% discount for this order. Seeing this, Qin Mo's right hand that was holding the mouse paused slightly. His deep eyes swept over the computer screen and landed on the two characters who were still whispering to each other. His eyes gradually turned cold. In fact, the main reason why Qin Mo didn't make a move in the beginning was that those two were too close. Did they need to be so close to each other just to play a game? Although he wouldn't interfere too much with young people's business, after all, no one wanted to be controlled when they were 16 or 17 years old. But there were some principles that couldn't be violated. Until now, Qin Mo still hadn't forgotten that this guy in front of him had liked a man. Idol, are you giving all these to me? Feng Shang didn't expect that his idol would think of him like this even with the Almighty around. Fujio held a lollipop in her mouth, tilted her head, and replied with a line of text. It'll be useful in the esports competition. I know your skills pretty well. In a few days our team will meet up, and we'll go to the internet cafe to play a game together. The two of them were chatting in private, so the others only saw that Fujio and Feng Shang's characters were very close. After Feng Shang saw that message, he made a sound of surprise before replying. Idol, did you forget that our team only has you and me? Now it's 3. Fujio smiled, and the corners of her mouth were full of mischief. That's why I'm online today. Besides, our new teammate is a girl. Feng Shang was shocked, and he typed faster. Girl? Where is she? I didn't see her. I always thought that we would be a single team. Idol. Why, you're not lying to me, are you? Baby Feng, as a team member, you must have absolute trust in your team leader. How could I lie to you? Fujiu looked at his reaction, and her smile widened. And our new teammate has a good personality. She's a nice girl. Feng Shang didn't care what kind of girl she was. He had already thought about how he would greet his new teammates when they met in a few days. Yep, I'll just say that I'll bring her to clear dungeons, fly her, and buy her equipment. He would ask his brother to top up more money for him. While the two of them were chatting happily, the handsome side face of the man on the other side turned cold bit by bit. Fujio was still typing and didn't notice. Qin Mo laughed. His smile was vicious no matter how one looked at it. He placed the cup back in its original position, stood up, and walked towards the youngster on the bed step by step. Chapter 148. Chatting so happily? Qin Mo's voice had always been light, and it sounded even more so at night. It was as if he didn't care about anything, but there was an irresistible coldness in his voice. After hearing the Almighty's question, Fujio raised her head, and found that the man was already in front of her. He was standing by the bed with a physics book in his hand. His khaki trousers made him look a lot softer, but the pressure he exuded was still very strong, and he still had the domineering aura of a military third generation. How should she put it? It was a little cool, but also a little cold. The most important thing was that those eyes didn't seem to be very happy. Fujio was still sucking on her lollipop. She didn't know what was going on, but that was what she thought. According to her understanding of the Almighty, he would attack her verbally when he was in a bad mood. Later, she just needed to find a way to flirt with the Almighty, and this problem would be solved. But, to Fujio's surprise, the Almighty didn't play by the rules at all. He asked her again, "Do you like men or women?" Such an elegant and direct question indeed needed a good answer. If she said she liked men, the Almighty would probably throw her out by the collar. If she said she liked women, she didn't want to lie, because it was against her will. But, girls are cute and boys are handsome. Fujio smiled with her beautiful peach blossom eyes. She twirled her silver hair with her fingers, and she looked like a rich young master. She leaned against the headboard, looking very handsome and evil. They're all okay. The most important thing is the face. I'm okay with those who are good-looking. All okay. Qin Mo curled up his lips slowly, looking unhappy and playful. You want to say that you like both men and women? Fujio put on a serious face. Being too handsome will always bring this kind of burden. Who gave you such strong confidence? Qin Mo's voice was very calm. Fujio thought about it and said seriously, My parents gave birth to me well. But Brother Mo, don't worry. Even if I like men, I won't do anything to you. With this answer, there shouldn't be any problem. The Almighty was probably asking her this question because of what she had done before, like wanting to keep the Almighty as a mistress. Fujio analyzed the reason while replying to Baby Feng's message. She didn't notice the cold light flashing in the man's eyes after he heard her words. If Secretary Liang saw this expression on his CEO's face, he would definitely break into a cold sweat. Because Qin Mo wasn't too happy right now. Almighty Qin thought that no one would want their little brother to have such a rich private life. He was the same. Eating both men and women? What a great ability. Qin Mo glanced at the silver-haired youngster who was still hugging his notebook and chatting away. His expression didn't change at all. His face was still as handsome as a god. His slender fingers moved and directly unbuttoned his trousers. Fujiu looked at the man's action, and her typing hand suddenly stopped. The man standing at the head of the bed stood tall and straight like a pine tree in the Tsang Mountain. He was very attractive. His every movement was calm and elegant, as if everything was under his control. But what was going on? Why did the Almighty take off his pants? Chapter 149. Brother Mo, what are you doing? Fujiu narrowed her eyes slowly, but she was still smiling, looking as handsome as ever. Qin Mo's voice was indifferent. Sleep, of course. But this is my room. Fujio raised her eyebrows to remind him. Chin Emo snorted and suddenly bent over. He put his left hand on the bed beside Fujio, and his aura enveloped her. Even that godlike handsome face of his was very close. His hair was as black as the night, adding a bit of evil to his noble aura. Even the few strands of bangs casually falling on his fair forehead made him look unbelievably handsome. He looked at her with an inexplicable heat in his eyes. When his slightly deep voice entered her ears, it was like an expensive red wine swirling slowly. Don't you want to sleep on the same bed with me? Today, Big Brother will fulfill your wish. There was even a hint of mockery in that indifferent voice. Don't think that she couldn't tell that the Almighty was doing it on purpose. Fujio was depressed. Haven't we already turned the page? Who gave you that illusion? The man raised his eyebrows and did not have the slightest intention to leave. Fujio smiled. Her thin lips curled up, and she got closer to the man. But I like men. Brother Emo, aren't you afraid of me? Chinmo's fingers paused, and then he pulled the young man away. He pressed Fujio against the headboard, and with a faint smile he said in an even colder tone. Behave yourself when you're sleeping. If you move even a little bit, I'll make you the last in physics class. Fujio. Didn't he promise to help her guess the questions? How could the Almighty change so quickly? But they slept together. It wouldn't be good for her if she was found out. Fujio's eyes curved as she thought of this. How can I control this? Brother Emo is so handsome. It's a test for me to sleep next to him. Really? Chin Emo chuckled. His lips were cold. You better control yourself. Don't stretch your hand over. Otherwise, I might chop off your claws. Fujio was dispirited. Brother Emo, you are a man too. You should understand that sometimes you really can't control yourself. Chin Emo looked at the troubled youngster. Fujio put on an evil and handsome face. You get it, right? To be honest, I don't really understand. Chinmo's voice was calm, his side profile elegant and handsome. After all, I'm not gay. No matter how handsome a man sleeps beside me, I won't feel anything. Fujio. Alright, even if Brother Emo can't feel it, what if I attack you? Chin Emo arched a brow. You can't control yourself? I really don't have good self-control. Fujio put her arm around Chinmo's shoulder like a good brother. Otherwise, I wouldn't have gone to nightclubs so often. So Almighty, go back to your room and sleep. Fujio naturally wouldn't say the last sentence out loud. She only used a pair of electric eyes to express her emotions. Chin Emo took the youngster's hand away, his smile turning colder. Since you have no self-control, I'll help you control it. Before Fujio could react, Chin Emo reached out and grabbed the tie on the sofa. He tied the youngster's right wrist and the other end to the headboard. Chapter 150. The young man's appearance on the bed was very pleasing to the eye, especially his face, which was almost as fair as porcelain jade under the pure white cotton pajamas he was wearing. His silver hair was handsome, his face was handsome, and his thin lips were curled up. At that moment, there was an indescribable feeling that made people's hearts beat faster. Chin Emo glanced at him and stood up. He raised his right hand and covered the young man's head and face under the quilt. Out of sight, out of mind. He really needed to be disciplined. If you go to those dirty places again, it won't be as simple as just tying you up. Chin Emo always knew that the young man was good-looking, but he didn't expect that he had such a side to him. He was lying there like a porcelain doll. Chin Emo suddenly remembered a gathering in the courtyard. In the private room, there was a young boy who called them Big Brother when he came in. He didn't know why, but he always felt a little repulsed when he thought about it. The only thing he was sure of was that he didn't want his little brother to be like that. Chin Emo usually didn't care about someone's sexual orientation. But today it was different. How could his little brother be under someone else's bed? Chin Emo turned around. His back was as straight as the desert. Contrary to his fiery thoughts, his deep eyes were cold, so cold that they almost affected the surrounding temperature. Fujio's unbound hand was hanging by the side of the bed. She pulled the quilt away, and the Almighty had already entered the bathroom. It seemed that she couldn't avoid it this time. But judging from the Almighty's reaction, he seemed to dislike her a little. Nothing should happen. Fujio moved her right hand again, and a light flashed in her black eyes. This knot wasn't simple. It looked ordinary, but it was actually very professional. The cross was hard to untie, even with a knife. The Almighty was indeed not easy to deal with. There shouldn't be anyone on the mainland who could study criminal psychology and make such a binding technique. If there was, shouldn't it be the police? Or maybe the Almighty's ability to leave meant that he was free from control. Fujio suddenly closed her eyes when she thought of this. After a few seconds, she opened them again. Her eyes were unfathomable and mysterious. Then she whistled with great interest. If the Almighty hadn't recognized her as his little brother, she would have competed with him. She wanted to see who was better, her or the Almighty. However, this wish was unlikely to come true. Speaking of wishes, if she had known earlier, she wouldn't have bragged to baby Feng. Now he had even blown himself into it. Fujio tilted her head and continued to fiddle with the black tie. Just as she was about to untie it, the Almighty appeared again. He looked like he had just taken a shower. His black hair was still damp, but he was fundamentally different from Fujio. Even in this state, Chinmo's presence was strong. He didn't take a towel and slowly strode over. After scanning her movements, his thin lips curved. "You're really capable, my little brother." "Not as good as Brother Mo." Fujio moved her hand again. "But I want to pee now, what should I do?" Mo seemed to have predicted that the youngster would come up with such an excuse. He lifted his eyebrows and said calmly, "Get up, I'll go with you." Chapter 151. Mo glanced at the youngster's fluffy head and slightly withered expression. His voice returned to its deep tone. "That's why I said, don't play tricks in front of me. I'm tying you up now to let you know that you shouldn't flirt so casually in the future. Regardless of whether it's in real life or in the game, men and women are the same." What else could Fujio say? The tone of an elder brother instructing his younger brother. It was rare that her male idol did not continue to attack her. However, Chinmo's next move made Fujio pause. Mo took off his shirt cleanly, which made him look even cooler. Perhaps it was because his figure was too good. Even without any accessories, the man just stood there inexplicably gave people a hazy and inviolable feeling. The Almighty was definitely the kind of person who didn't care about dogma. Otherwise, he wouldn't have played games even though he had a family business. Not to mention that he would tie her up just like that. Fujio was looking directly at Mo from her position. It would be weird if she looked away. Plus, she couldn't get tired of looking at the Almighty's body. She simply put her arm behind her head, using it as a cushion, and looked at the man from head to toe with pure admiration. Mo would drink a glass of wine before he slept. His upper body was half naked, his slender and fair fingers holding the glass. He raised his head and took a sip. His seductive waist and well-defined chest revealed the black chilin at his waist as he moved. When Fujio wanted to take a closer look, her line of sight met that pair of deep, rippling eyes. He lowered his head and stared at her. His glowing thin lips were very close to her, as if even his breath could hit her lips. "Why don't you mention the other requirements? Like helping you take off your pajamas?" "Take off my pajamas? What a joke. How could pajamas be taken off so casually?" Even if he was wrapped in bandages and wearing a hurdle vest underneath, he couldn't take off his pajamas. Fujio smiled and said calmly, "Brother Mo, I don't need to trouble you with these trivial matters. I like to sleep with my clothes on." "Really?" This time Mo didn't say much. He turned to the side and took off the watch on his wrist. He placed it by the bedside and turned off the light, leaving only a weak light beside the bedside. Then he took off his trousers, which he had already unbuttoned. His tall and slender figure lay down beside Fujio. His nose was high, and in the dark he gave off an indescribable sense of asceticism. Very few people could be so luxurious and indifferent in this situation. Fujio didn't care about Fujio at all. The people in the outside world were right. If they used Almighty Qin's sleeping face as a poster, Supreme Alliance would definitely become even more popular. When he was sleeping alone it felt very big, but with another person, it felt a little different. Especially when the other person's aura was too strong. this feeling would be magnified infinitely. Fujio moved her hand that was leaning on the side of the bed and turned over. Fujio could still smell the faint scent of tobacco. This scent came from another person, and it made Fujio want to turn her head around. It was because she had never slept with anyone before. Chapter 152. Under his body. When Fujio heard these words, she raised the corner of her lips devilishly. Brother Emo, you must have misunderstood something. Even if I'm gay, I'm not the one on the bottom. Chin Emo didn't say anything. He just turned his face sideways and glanced at the youngster indifferently. Strangely, Fujio saw the doubt in his eyes. Now was not the right time. She had to find a chance to knock the Almighty against the wall and show him how aggressive she was. In bed, it was better for her not to cause any more trouble. If the joke went too far, the Almighty might tear her pajamas when he made a move, and that would not be worth it. So even though Fujio untied her wrists, she didn't turn over and press Chin Emo under her body. It was okay to think about it, but the consequences would be huge. As she thought about it, she felt sleepy without realizing it. In fact, it was already very late, and the hand of the clock was already at 12 o'clock. The two of them played badminton in the day, studied physics at night, and got the first kill again. This was mentally and physically exhausting. And Fujio had even assembled a notebook the day before. Now that it was quiet all around, she closed her eyes. Chin Emo thought that the youngster would say something, but after a while, he realized that he had already fallen asleep. His long eyelashes cast a faint shadow under his eyes, and his quiet handsome face made the youngster look so harmless, like an angel who had fallen to the mortal world. Chin Emo stared at that face for a minute before covering himself with the quilt, and closing his eyes as well. After autumn, the temperature in the north could drop by 6 or 7 degrees a day. Especially at night, when the north wind blew, the raindrops hit the window, making it even colder. Chin Emo and Fujio both forgot to turn on the heater, and this cold current came too suddenly. Unconsciously, Fujio, who was afraid of the cold, leaned against the warm spot. The next day, the first rays of the morning sun shone through the swaying curtains. Don't think that the weather would get warmer at this time. Sometimes, the early morning at the end of autumn was even colder than the middle of the night. Fujio moved her hands, and she got closer and closer to that warm spot. Who was so nice as to arrange such a big hot water bag for her on the bed. It was so warm. Fujio couldn't help hugging that warmth and rubbing her face against it. But the moment she opened her eyes, all of her thoughts became clear. The thing she was hugging wasn't a hot water bag, but the Almighty. Chin Emo seemed to have woken up just a little earlier than her. The light shone on his elegant and handsome face, making him look ambiguous. Compared to his appearance, his eyes were even more beautiful, like black gemstones. His messy black hair made him look even more charming. At this moment, Chin Emo was looking at her. His eyes were so deep that it seemed like they could suck a person in. The two of them were very close to each other. Her lips were pressed against his chest, and their legs were unknowingly placed together. Their posture was very intimate. The two of them were so close that they were so close to each other. Of Emo Chinjio of Emo suddenly of Chin of. His aura surrounded her from all directions. Chapter 153. Chin Mo's eyes were still dark and a little unfocused, as if he wasn't fully awake yet. Fujio knew that there was a type of person like this. Their eyes were open, but their thoughts weren't. Under normal circumstances, such people were not only very smart but also very vigilant. Fujio's first reaction was that her identity as a girl must not be exposed. Without a second thought, he arched his knees, separating the two of them from each other. She was very glad that she stuffed a ball of paper in her crotch to make it look bulging. But there was still a difference between paper and a man's lower body. She just didn't know how much of Chin Mo's consciousness had recovered. Fujio's action made Chin Mo's eyes gradually clear up. Along with that cold light, his lower body seemed to be more awake. It was pressed against Fujio's knees, and it was very obvious that it was burning. Qin Mo's back seemed to pause for a moment when he sensed the change in himself. He frowned suddenly, moved his big hands, lifted the quilt, and sat up directly on the bed. To create more chaos, Fujio smiled handsomely and sat up as well. Her white face was very close, and her silver hair was half curled up. Even her breath hit Qin Mo's ear as she curled her thin lips into an evil smile. Brother Mo, it's nothing. Men are always more energetic when they wake up in the morning. It has nothing to do with who is lying next to you. Qin Mo's handsome face was cold and restrained, and he looked down slightly at the head of the bed. His magnetic voice sounded like it was laced with sand, low, husky, and cold. It made a woman's soul go numb when she heard it. Looks like I have to tie your hands the next time I tie you up. Fujio. Wait, she wasn't the one who was reacting. Why tie her hands? Alas, the Almighty had already pushed her away and stood up. His expression was very cold. He took a towel and walked into the bathroom. In other words, she didn't even have a chance to refute. This was such an injustice. However, the Almighty's attention wouldn't be on her this time. Fujio lowered her eyes and looked at the slightly bulging ball in her pants. A man's judgment wouldn't be accurate when he was half asleep, which was why Fujio dared to sleep with the Almighty. Coupled with the Almighty's reaction just now, his thoughts should only be focused on his lower body. Umitba, the purest physical reaction of a man had saved her. Sleeping was something that only happened once. There would never be a second time. That was what Fujio told herself. But since ancient times, there had always been a decisive gap between imagination and reality. The shower in the bathroom was running noisily, but there was no steam rising. The cold water droplets dripped onto the man's honey-colored muscular chest just like that. Every inch of his abdominal muscles was extremely sexy. That kind of hardness only made people want to be hugged in his arms and loved fiercely. Qin Mo tilted his head, his perfectly trimmed black hair slightly covering his eyes. The lower half of his body was still moving. Under such circumstances, the Almighty was the only one who could remain indifferent. Perhaps it had something to do with his background. While Qin Mo was extremely seductive, there was also an indescribable sense of tranquility around him. It was as though all the noise could be stopped in front of him. But even Qin Mo couldn't figure out why he had such a reaction. He was pretty sure he wasn't bent. Was it because he had been too angry recently? Chapter 154. After the incident in the morning, Qin Mo's mood was obviously not as good as last night. His handsome face was full of unfriendliness. Fujio had changed from her pajamas into her school uniform. She had silver hair, a light smile, and a school bag on one shoulder. She looked handsome and energetic. She looked like she had a good sleep. People seldom came to the house. Now that the young man was here, Aunt Zhang made 4 types of breakfast in one go. Fried buns, fried dough sticks, small meat buns, and vegetable porridge. She smiled and asked Fujio to eat more. Fujio naturally wouldn't refuse this kindness. She enjoyed it very much, especially the fried buns. They were golden yellow in color, crispy on the outside and tender on the inside. They were delicious. But Fujio couldn't finish a whole plate by herself. The Almighty only drank milk in the morning and read the business newspaper in his hands. Obviously, he didn't want to finish them for her. Fujio couldn't bear to let Aunt Zhang down, so she put the remaining pieces in the takeaway box. Aunt Zhang was happy to see this. Young Master Jiu has so many friends. Our young master never thought of bringing breakfast for his classmates. It's not that I have many friends, but my desk mate is nice to me. Fujio smiled. I want her to taste Aunt Zhang's cooking. Aunt Zhang loved to listen to the young man. Seeing that Fujio was about to go to school, she waved at the door reluctantly. Remember to come with young master next time. Madam will be there too. Madam will like young Master Jiu. Okay. Fujio sat in the car and curled up her lips at Aunt Zhang. Qin Mo was sitting next to the young man. He glanced at the extra box of fried buns in the young man's hands indifferently. After a while, he ordered the driver in a cold voice, "Drive." Yes, young master. Although the driver could tell that his young master's tone wasn't very good, he still followed Qin Mo's order and went to Jiang City No. 1 Middle School first. The Qin family's car was very eye-catching, whether it was the model or the license plate. Fortunately, there weren't many students at school at this time. However, when the car appeared, it still attracted a lot of attention. Shui Yaoyao was memorizing English with her headphones on, but after seeing the unusual reaction, she looked to her side. A silver-haired young man walked out of the extended black Lincoln. The corners of the young man's mouth were curled up, with a youthful handsomeness and mischievousness. Who else could it be but His Highness Jiao? When Shui Yaoyao saw that face, she quickly walked over. "Good morning, Your Highness Jiao." As soon as Fu Jiao got out of the car, she turned her head and saw Shui Yaoyao's smiling face. She turned her eyes to Qin Mo and said, "Brother Mo, I'll be leaving first. Be careful on the road." After saying that, Fu Jiao waved her hand and walked towards Shui Yaoyao with a smile while carrying her black school bag on one shoulder and one hand in her pocket. Shui Yaoyao watched as the youngster walked closer and closer, her face turning red. She was so excited to see Highness Jiao that she forgot that they were at the school gate. She didn't know if her greeting Highness Jiao like this would have a bad influence on Highness Jiao. At this thought, Shui Yaoyao glanced to the side and saw a few girls pointing at them. Their eyes revealed a sense of gossip, making Shui Yaoyao twist her fingers uncomfortably. Chapter 155. Shui Yaoyao nodded. After seeing the young man's smile, she felt a lot braver. Fu Jiao curled up her lips and handed the lunchbox to Shui Yaoyao. "This is breakfast made by the Almighty. Try it, it's pretty good." This. Shui Yaoyao subconsciously glanced at the car behind the young man, and thought to herself, "Your Highness Jiao, aren't you afraid that Almighty Qin will be unhappy when he sees you giving me Almighty Qin's breakfast?" Fortunately, the car only paused for a moment before driving away indifferently, which was very much in line with its owner's personality. In Shui Yaoyao's eyes, there was indifference. But in the driver's eyes, their young master's eyes were extremely cold. Even the surrounding temperature dropped. Qin Mo supported his chin with one hand, watching the two figures getting further and further away in the rearview mirror. The corner of his mouth lifted, but there was no warmth in it. At this moment, Shui Yaoyao had just finished pondering. The Almighty's breakfast. Could it be? "Your Highness Jiao, did you sleep in the great god's house last night?" Fu Jiao stretched herself and nodded. His Highness Jiao was really handsome, which was why the students kept stopping and looking at him excitedly. But His Highness Jiao was actually living in the Almighty's house. What kind of relationship did they have to be that good? Shui Yaoyao thought about how they played badminton yesterday, especially the scene where Almighty Qin leaned over and pinched Highness Jiao's chin. Wait a minute. No. She couldn't think too much. Even if Highness Jiao lived in the great god's house, it didn't mean that they had that kind of relationship, right? But if there really was something, Shui Yaoyao's face turned serious, her eyes shining. "Your Highness Jiao, I will bless you and Almighty Qin. Two equally handsome people together would be the most suitable. Even if they were not understood by many people, as long as His Highness Jiao liked them, she would support them." Fu Jiao was confused by Shui Yaoyao's stare, so she changed the topic. "How was your hero practice yesterday?" "It's alright, but I can't increase my speed." "Just practice a few more times and you'll be fine." "Which internet cafe do you usually go to? Let's make an appointment today. We'll let you meet our other teammate and reward you with a punch of pleasure." Yaoyao. Fu Jiao understood why Shui Yaoyao had such an expression after hearing this name. She reached out and patted her shoulder. "Get used to it." Shui Yaoyao was still trying to accept it. After all, she never imagined that one day she would be related to the rich man who flirted with girls and threw money around. "Your Highness Jiao, how did you get to know this awarding you a punch of pleasure? I heard that he only takes girls to clear dungeons." Fu Jiao smiled casually. "I met him during the competition, and he even treated me to hot pot." "During the competition?" Shui Yaoyao paused, as if she thought of something and said, "Your Highness Jiao, have you been playing hero for a long time?" Fu Jiao unwrapped a lollipop and put it in her mouth. To her, any game is used to train her hand speed. "Then what's your in-game name?" Even now, Shui Yaoyao still remembers the beautiful finger technique that His Highness Jiu used when he was teaching her yesterday. He was definitely an expert among experts. But in the broadcast of all the major teams, she couldn't find anyone who was similar to His Highness Jiu. His Highness Jiu, who exactly is he? Chapter 156. Hearing that, Shui Yaoyao was completely stunned. Her heart felt like it had been pierced by those 4 words. Spadesy, the new player king who won countless first clears as soon as he debuted. The almighty in Zone C who broke countless records but was obsessed with his whereabouts. The top player who broke all the rules, acted alone, and didn't listen to any team. Shui Yaoyao had heard of this name many times. Sometimes, when she was playing games, she would often see this person on the ranking list and tell herself, look, not everyone in this world who doesn't have money will be buried. Spadesy was such an example. His finger skills were beautiful, unexpected, and he was the king. All the esports media in Jiang City wanted to get the first-hand information on this person. But he was invisible. Some people said that Spadesy must be very ugly, which was why he was afraid to show his true face. Otherwise, how could he not accept such a good opportunity to be famous? Even if it was just a live broadcast, he could earn 100,000 yuan. Others said that even if Spadesy looked okay, he was definitely not young. Looking at his skillful operation and his familiarity with all kinds of tricks in the game, he must be an uncle-level man. But he was him. Shui Yaoyao covered her mouth. She never thought that the person who was like a benchmark for her was their Highness Jiu. Even though she was already sitting in the classroom, Shui Yaoyao still couldn't calm down. If the girls in school knew about this, they would go crazy. Highness Jiu, he was not some nouveau riche trash at all. He was not only gentle and handsome, but he was also the almighty and hero. Shui Yaoyao looked sideways at the young man's clean and handsome side profile, and she couldn't help but murmur. If the anti-fans knew that Spadesy looked like this, the game would explode. And those reporters would take back their guesses about Spadesy's appearance. Highness Jiu, why don't you accept the interview? Because it's not the right time yet. Fu Jiu twirled the carbon pen and smiled lightly, but there was a hint of blackness brewing in her eyes. Shui Yaoyao didn't know what Fu Jiu was planning. She thought that she needed some time to digest this exciting news. Ever since she started playing hero, she never thought that she would meet Spadesy one day. Because she knew very well that the decision was made by a god different from mortals. But now, she actually wanted to follow him and form a team to play in the professional competition. What kind of feeling was that? Those who had never played games would never understand. Her heart was in a mess, and even her blood was boiling. She felt like she had finally started to realize her dream. This was the first time she was so close to it, and it was all given to her by the young man. Fu Jiu didn't understand the effect she had on Shui Yaoyao. She was still looking at the physics questions that the Almighty had given her yesterday. I'll be relying on it for my monthly exams in a few days. Ding 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 ding. The bell rang. After the physics teacher came in, he didn't call people to answer questions like before. Instead, he looked at them, coughed softly and said, "Today we will rearrange the tables. Men and women can't sit at the same table. Now we will start to form groups freely." The students were all dumbfounded. He listened to the mournful wails below. "It can't be. We've just finished lining up. Why are we lining up again? It wasn't easy for me to get close to my goddess, yet you still insist that men and women can't sit at the same table." Chapter 157. Fairy tales were indeed all lies. The boys held their bags sadly and bid farewell to their goddesses. Some girls were unhappy. After all, they were at this age. Shui Yaoyao was the one who didn't know what to do. After all, she had already been treated that way because of the separate tables. But it turned out that it was different this time. Two girls walked over and smiled at her. "You like His Highness Jiu too, right? We like him too. Do you want to sit together?" At that time, Shui Yaoyao knew that there might be a lot of handsome people in this world. But there was only one person who could use his charisma and straightforwardness to influence the people around him. That was why they called him His Highness Jiu, a unique existence. Fujiu also heard the voices. She put one hand in her pocket and smiled at the three of them handsomely. When they were separated, she even gave each of them a lollipop. Unlike Shui Yaoyao, those two girls were very excited. The candy in their mouths tasted very sweet. Just like what His Highness Jiu said, girls should eat more candy and be kind to others. Even if they couldn't be kind, they shouldn't laugh at others. Giving others respect was giving yourself respect. They all learned it and were proud of it. In fact, they had privately discussed sending someone to add His Highness Jiu's WeChat, but His Highness Jiu didn't look like someone who liked to be disturbed. Why didn't His Highness Jiu become a star? Then they could be his fans without any qualms, and they could make all kinds of accessories, like a pillow. Thinking of this, the two girls became even more talkative. After Shui Yaorao heard them, she said to them firmly, "Don't worry, your dreams will come true one day." When a pillow came out, she would buy one too. Actually, Fujiu didn't want to sit at the same table with Shui Yaorao anymore. She wanted to sit at her own table, so that she could surf the internet in class. After all, playing online games was only a temporary thing. After she solved He Honghua's problem, she had to return to her life in the Matrix. Fujiu looked around and found that the last table was a good spot. It was near the window, and it was a dead end. Although it was a bad place for good students, it was the most suitable place for her to work. Fujiu walked over with a smile, put down her black school bag and sat down. No one would have thought that Fujiu would choose such a seat. That was the seat of a student who had been abandoned by the teachers. In the past, Fujiu did sit there, but he was the last one. Later, He Honghua donated a lot of money to the school so that he could study well, so that he could sit in the front row. Why did Fujiu sit back down in the blink of an eye? The students looked at each other without saying a word. Even the physics teacher himself pretended not to see this situation. Although the English teacher had praised Fujiu for a long time the last time they met, Fujiu didn't know what to say. But in the eyes of the physics teacher, Fujiu was still the one who pulled down the average score of their class. It was not discrimination, but the physics teacher felt that good positions should be reserved for good students. All right, since everyone has chosen their seats, let's start the class. The physics teacher clapped his hands, and the rest of the people retracted their gazes. Jiang Feiyang looked at Fujiu and hesitated, but he didn't go over. Chapter 158. In the end, only the seat next to Fujiu was empty. It was obvious who Shui Yaorao was going to sit with. The other two girls also supported her. After all, His Highness Jiu was sitting in that corner, but the teacher didn't say a word. Some people also pretended not to see anything, and the vague sense of exclusion was still there. In school, grades were the most important thing. They all knew this. But they really didn't want to see His Highness Jiu sitting alone in the corner. The physics teacher obviously didn't understand what these students were thinking, and his voice became a bit cold. I've already made it very clear that men and women can't sit together. Shui, you should know your situation. Getting into a good university is your only way out. Don't think about those unrealistic things. Read more books when you have time. Sit down. Shui Yaoyao still wanted to say something. Fujiu looked up and gave her a don't worry look. She smiled at her, which clearly meant that it was okay to sit in the back row. But this physics teacher seemed to be very prejudiced against her. If it was for studying, Fujiu wouldn't have bothered the teacher. It was a matter of principle. She didn't know if it was because of studying with the Almighty for a whole night, but she could actually understand a little bit in this class. But the physics teacher didn't hit the main points in class. Simply put, he was a little inferior to the Almighty. Maybe it wasn't the teacher's ability, but the Almighty was too inhuman. Fujiu once again thought about the materials she had read in the Qin family study. Criminal psychology, logical reasoning, forensic general knowledge. Ordinary people probably wouldn't read these books often. While Fujiu was deep in thought, Shui Yaoyao saw that the young man didn't look unhappy, so she calmed down. She knew that whether it was the students or the teacher, the impression of His Highness Jiu as a good-for-nothing was long ingrained. She had experienced this feeling of being isolated before, so she wanted to sit at the same table as His Highness Jiu. But obviously His Highness Jiu wasn't her. That person had an incomparably strong heart. He never cared about being excluded or isolated. Just like now, he was holding his chin and taking notes in class, as if he didn't care where he sat. One day, when people knew His Highness Jiu's true identity, they would know that he was never a good-for-nothing. It was good to have one person at a table. Fu Jiu could log into the game very smoothly, and she didn't have to deliberately avoid anyone. After all, she was using Almighty Qin's account, and it would only be troublesome if someone peeped at her. Usually, it was very difficult to find a player's exact location without adding them as friends. But to Fu Jiu, this was nothing. She used her microdata control to lock onto awarding you a slap of pleasure, and sent a message through the Alliance's platform. Are you there? Feng Shang, who was still playing games, was startled. He thought he had been poisoned, but when he saw that the person who spoke was his idol, he immediately perked up. Yes. Let's meet at West Town Internet Cafe at 7 p.m. tonight. Fu Jiu typed lazily. Let's work together to clear a dungeon. Feng Shang had never been to an internet cafe before. Just the thought of teaming up with real people to clear a dungeon made him excited. Alright, we'll listen to our idol. Chapter 159. After Feng Shang received Fu Jiu's last message, he immediately stood up from his chair. She began to pick out her clothes very seriously. The last time he met his idol was too coincidental. Not like this time. Strictly speaking, they were going to have a gay meetup. Moreover, it was not a one-on-one gay meetup, but a team meetup. Although Feng Shang had never met anyone in the game, he had read quite a few novels about them. It was a team meetup, and the feeling was like he was about to see the girl he loved. Even his heart was beating faster than usual. Needless to say, Feng Shang was really excited, so much so that he went to the entrance of the internet cafe an hour earlier to wait. Anyone who had lived in the north would understand the feeling of the cold wind blowing on the face at the end of autumn, bringing with it a little pain. However, none of this could stop Feng Shang's blood from boiling. However, the driver who dropped him off came back uneasily. He rolled down the window and said, "Second young master, do you want to wait inside?" "No." Feng Shang was very insistent. "I want to give them a surprise. Go, don't let my brother know about this." The driver had no choice but to drive the car away. If he did this twice, the boss would definitely notice. He locked the computer, pushed open the door and walked out. "Hey, little brother, what are you doing standing outside?" I'm waiting for someone." Feng Shang was still stuttering. The owner of the internet cafe pushed the door open. "Waiting for someone? A gay meetup? Then come in. My shop has big windows. If you stand inside, they can see you." Feng Shang's eyes widened. How did you know that I'm here for a meeting?" "In my internet cafe, there are 3 or 4 people meeting up every day to play hero. It's not rare for real people to play together." The owner of the internet cafe held the cigarette in his mouth and looked a little roguish. However, he managed to convince Feng Shang. At that moment, he seemed to understand why his idol had chosen to meet here. The boss was a good person. After another half an hour, when Fu Jiu walked in with Shui Yaoyao, she saw student Feng holding a cup of milk tea and stuttering with the owner. "It seems like you've been doing well when I wasn't around." Fu Jiu took off her school jacket as she walked and threw it on the sofa. It was a little hot in the internet cafe, so she had to take it off. The boss looked up at the young man and said, "So it's your friend. But let me say this first, this milk tea costs money." "Sure, how much is it?" "I'll pay you after the game." Fu Jiu blinked her left eye, looking very handsome. Feng Shang was a little embarrassed. I didn't bring any cash when I came out, so. You treated me last time, so I'll treat you this time. We still have to work together later, so let's have dinner at the internet cafe. The fast food here is pretty good." Fu Jiu even complimented the person along the way. The boss had a cigarette in his mouth and was very happy. "Sure, write down what you want to eat, and I'll get someone to make it for you." "Did you hear that?" Fu Jiu smiled faintly and turned her head. "I forgot to introduce you. Yaoyao, this is Feng Shang. You can also ask him to give you a punch of pleasure. Shui Yaoyao was stunned. She thought that according to the style of awarding you a slap of pleasure in the game, he would be a tough man with a deep voice or a big, burly man who could dig feet. But who would have thought that he would end up like this? Cough. Student Feng coughed heavily and said very seriously, I have already recharged money in the game. I'll bring you to play dungeons, and I'll bring you to fly. Chapter 160. Shui Yaoyao didn't want to laugh, but she couldn't help it after hearing what he often said in the game. Okay. Feng Shang thought that this girl brought by his idol was easy to get along with. It was the first time that Shui Yaoyao met a guy who didn't mind her being fat. She felt his friendliness, and her nervousness disappeared. I'm not good at it. Please teach me later. Feng Shang said. No problem. If you can't pass, you can use money. With me here, how can you not pass? Fujio stood up with a lollipop in her mouth. She curved her thin lips, clenched her right hand into a fist, and stretched it out. Let's go. Let's shock Zone C. Looking at the fist in front of them, Shui Yaoyao and Feng Shang looked at each other. They stretched out their hands and pressed against each other. Just like that, a dark horse team that would shock the esports selection contest was formed in the internet cafe. The three of them sat handsomely in a row, all wearing black headphones. Among them, Fujio's fingers were undoubtedly the most beautiful. From logging into the game to accepting orders, she did it all in one go. It was mealtime, so there weren't many people in the internet cafe. Usually, there would be a large number of people entering after 8 o'clock. We're still missing one person. Fujio wore headphones and looked sideways at Feng Shang. Call them on the bulletin board. Ever since the boss found out that Fujio was Spadesy, he wanted to see the young man play with his own eyes. Now that he heard that they were missing one person, he put his cigarette into the ashtray and said, Do you think I can do it? Fujio turned around and saw him. She smiled. Of course. There was another name in the team. Although it wasn't on the leaderboard, it was of a high level. It seemed like it hadn't been played for a long time. The owner of the internet cafe typed quickly, Open it. The four of them each had their own specialties. Fujio was the main attacker, and every move she made was fatal. She calmly commanded everyone and put them in their proper positions. In such a small internet cafe, the rhythmic tapping of the keyboard sounded. No one knew that a team was about to be born here. It was only a short half an hour. First kill completed. A dazzling silver light appeared on the screen. Along with the sound of the special effects, someone who was surfing the net pushed the door open and walked in. F*CK, who got the first kill. This voice was really emotional. The owner of the internet cafe stood up and swiped his ID card to open the computer. Then another group of people walked in. At this time, the internet cafe was completely lively. Fujio, who originally wanted to eat here, also gave up on the idea. She glanced at Feng Shang and Shui Yaoyao and took off her headphones. Shall we find a place outside to talk? The two of them naturally agreed. There were too many people in the internet cafe, so it was inconvenient to talk. When Fujio walked past the cashier counter, she paused and said to the owner of the internet cafe inside, Are you interested in playing professional matches with me? Me? Professional competition? The owner of the internet cafe choked on the smoke in his mouth. Cough, I can't take it anymore. I'm too old. Don't you see the pro players on TV? They're all young. Chapter 161. There's no need to play. The boss removed the cigarette and placed it between his fingers. With a mischievous look on his face, he said, If it's to win a prize or something, I might consider it. Fujio laughed. How can winning an award be enough? If we don't shock the esports world, why should we play games? Think about it. Hearing that, the owner's pupils contracted. Someone playing a game shouted, Boss, give me a bottle of water. He's coming. With a cigarette in his mouth, the boss took out a bottle of mineral water from the fridge and glanced at Fujio. Take me with you during the competition. Fujio smiled. Okay. Shui Yaoyao watched the scene from the side. She didn't say anything at first, but after they walked out of the internet cafe, she said, the boss's ultimate move was amazing. I didn't even move, and the monsters in front of me were all killed. It's a stealth expert. Feng Shang's eyes lit up when he said this. I really didn't expect the boss of a small internet cafe to be so good at playing games. Fujio chuckled. His right fingers are more agile than his left, and when he's holding something, his index finger will subconsciously tap the side. This is a habit formed by people who play games often. He used to be in a professional team, but only he knows why he left. Idol, you couldn't have seen through him from the start. Even though Feng Shang hadn't finished his sentence, Fujio had already understood what he meant. I noticed it the first time I came to this internet cafe. The boss was still tinkering with the computer. Otherwise, why do you think I invited you here? In the end, Fujio's handsome face had a handsome arc. Feng Shang and Shui Yaoyao looked at each other. They were almost certain that the owner of the internet cafe felt that he had been tricked by His Highness Jiao, Idol. However, to be able to determine a person's class through a single movement, this was simply too overpowered. Why are you all looking at me? Fujio put on the black mask and put her hands in the pockets of her uniform. Her eyes were still smiling. Let's find a place to eat. Feng Shang nodded and said, It's such a cold day. Eat something warm. Why don't we go to my house and eat hot pot? Your house is a bit far, so let's go. I still need to go back and study physics after eating. Fujio's heart ached at the thought of this. Shui Yaoyao didn't care where she ate. She had never had the chance to eat with people in the game before. Feng Shang felt the same, and he followed Fujio excitedly. Just as the three of them were about to cross the road, a group of people walked over from the other side of the sidewalk. Every one of them was wearing the clothes of a professional team. They were all above the standard height, so even their aura was very strong. The one in the lead was Fujio's old enemy, her agent Du Zhe. Other than Du Zhe, there was also Fu Ximing. As usual, Du Zhe was like a lackey. He was dressed like a proper person and blocked the path on the left for Fu Ximing. Young master, this way, this way. Fu Ximing also saw Fujio at this moment. His face was cold and arrogant, as if he didn't want to talk to Fujio at all. He strolled over. Chapter 162. Some people in that team knew Fujio. After all, some of them were from He Honghua's team. Their impression of Fujio had always been that useless person who only knew how to throw money at people and had no ability at all. Someone is really carefree. He still has the mood to come to the internet cafe. He's just a useless wastrel. How much do you expect him to achieve? It seems like it was right for us to leave the company. With He Honghua's love for her son, sooner or later, we will be in trouble. Shui Yaoyao knew that they were talking about His Highness Jiao. She tilted her head and looked at the young man. Fujio was still wearing a mask, but her deep eyes were very bright. They were like the ice in the winter, cold and bone-chilling. What kind of people are together? I heard from my classmates this afternoon that someone found a big fat pig as his girlfriend. Now it seems like it's true. Fujio didn't move at first. But after hearing that, Shui Yaoyao saw the young man raise his leg and kick that team member who was about to pass by them. The action was very fierce and very handsome. There was a loud bang. That team member covered his knee. He was in so much pain that his face turned pale. Don't talk if you don't know how to talk. Fujio's hands were still in the pockets of her school uniform. Her side profile was indifferent. At least don't talk sh*t. You. The others in the team couldn't take it anymore. They raised their fists and were about to throw them at Fujio. Stop. Fu Ximing's cold voice rang out. Do you know what the consequences will be if you start a fight in front of everyone while wearing these clothes? Tomorrow, your pictures will appear in the esports tabloids. Come back. A person who can't even pass the exam is not worth your time. The team members tugged at their bags indignantly and pointed at Fujio. Feng Shang was still rolling up his sleeves. This was the first time he fought with his friends, so he was very proactive. Idol, do you need me to fight? No need. Fujio curled up her lips and smiled. It's not fun to fight them here. Fengshang was a little confused. Then where should we fight? Did they need to jump to a place to fight? He had never fought before, so he had no idea. In the game. Fujio looked up. Through the mask, her voice carried the charisma of a king. Let's crush them in the esports selection contest. A gust of wind blew past, brushing away the silver hair on her forehead, revealing a faint glow. However, that group of people still didn't know that Fujio was Spadesy, and they were still indignant. Young Master Fu, are we going to let that kid off just like that? Did you hear what he just said? Spouting shit. It's obvious that he doesn't put you in his eyes. The team members obviously wanted to vent their anger. In the past, they didn't like that piece of trash in the company. They tolerated him for the sake of getting paid. Now that they were no longer working under He Honghua, why should they tolerate him? Chapter 163. Brilliant, young Master Fu's idea is brilliant. The tallest member gave a thumbs up and glanced at the teammate next to him. The two of them had a poisonous look on their faces. That trash's good days were about to come to an end. It was true that Fu Ximing didn't take Fujio seriously. It was just that the mouse incident last time made him feel that it was time to teach her a lesson. Did she really think that he was still that illegitimate child who didn't know how to speak up after being wronged? It was time for everyone to see who the real young master of the Fu family was. Fu Ximing didn't understand at all. His Lord Jiu had always disdained to fight with him for the title of young master of the Fu family. When the team had a gay meetup, they would drink if they passed. Fujio's first words were a dozen ice Budweisers, which was very down to earth. Fengshang felt that ever since he followed his idol, all the firsts were gone. Like gay meetups, like fighting, like drinking. If you're not used to it, drink less. Fujio's drinking posture was very evil. Fengshang looked at it and said seriously, "Idol, believe me, I can do it." "Oh, then you drink it." After Fujio said that, she stretched out her hand and said, "Boss, give me another dozen." Fengshang froze. Again. "Tell me about everyone's good points." After Fujio entered the zone, she really looked like a CEO in the business world. She dipped her finger in wine and tapped it on the table. "Fengshang, you're fast. When the match starts, stand in this position. You're mainly responsible for defending and healing. Yao Yao you." The youth's face looked very youthful and clean, but at that moment, they felt that the youth was not an ordinary high school student. It was like a mature soul living in a young body. She didn't know why she felt this way. But the young man's orders always made people involuntarily submit to him, as expected of their Royal Highness Jiu. With such a captain, there was nothing to be afraid of even in the esports selection contest, where there were many experts. Shui Yaoyao smiled. Her round face was slightly red, perhaps because she was drunk, or perhaps because she was full of anticipation for the competition. At this moment, in Rivertown No. 1 Middle School, a familiar black Lincoln limousine was parked at the side of the road. There were several bodyguards standing around it, each of them wearing a black Bluetooth headset for easy communication. Regardless of whether it was the car or the people, they all exuded an unapproachable aura. Even so, it couldn't stop the enthusiasm of the students at the school gate. Many girls were tiptoeing and taking pictures with their phones. The driver stood outside and glanced at the watch on his wrist. He seemed to be in a hurry. With a troubled expression, he said to the person sitting in the car, "Co Chin, it's been half an hour. Should we leave now?" Ninth young master should have returned home by now. Qin Mo held the physics information in his hands, his long fingers tapping on it. His lips curved upwards, but his gaze was frighteningly cold. "Should?" The driver immediately said. "I'll ask again." "No need." Qin Mo casually tossed the physics book to the side, crossing his legs elegantly. His perfect side profile seemed to be coated with a layer of ice. "Come up, drive." The driver hesitated for a moment and said, "Aren't you going to wait for young Master Jiu?" Chapter 164. The driver didn't dare to say anything more. He immediately turned around and got into the car. His hand holding the steering wheel was still a little unsteady. He could tell that the young master was not in a good mood. After all, he had been the Qin family's chauffeur for so long, and he had never seen the young master wait for anyone like this. In the end, the person that the young master was waiting for didn't appear. Of course, he knew that the young master was. It was hard to say. Turn left ahead. When Qin Mo's low voice came from behind, the driver was confused. Turn left? Go straight to the Fu family. Qin Mo's eyes didn't have the slightest fluctuation, but it was so dark that it seemed like it could emit a cold mist. To the Fu family. The driver couldn't hide the surprise on his face. He glanced at the rearview mirror and said after a while, "Yes." But going to the Fu family without informing young Master Jio was not in line with young Master Fu's usual style. No, that's not right. It should be said that the young master had never been to someone's house before. Why did young master want to go to the Fu family? Should he ask his wife to call the other party's wife first? But it was so sudden. They usually didn't have any contact with the Fu family, and they didn't have any contact information at all. Qin Mo didn't know what the driver was thinking. Right now, Almighty Qin's idea was very simple. Catch that guy and teach him a lesson. Achoo. Fu Jio was having a good time drinking, but for some reason, she suddenly sneezed. Feng Shang was already swaying left and right. His face was also red. Idol, you, how did you become two? Because you're drunk. Fu Jio held the glass of beer and drank the last mouthful. She looked up and said, "Boss, come check out." Shui Yaorao was surprisingly a good drinker. She drank 3 bottles of wine and nothing happened. After Fu Jio handed over the money, she tilted her head and said to Shui Yaoyao, "This guy should come with me. If he goes back in this state, his brother will definitely question him." I'm not afraid of my brother. Feng Shang, who was originally drunk, suddenly sobered up. I was just being obedient. Fu Jio nodded and said half-heartedly, Yeah, you're the most obedient." As he spoke, he pulled her arm over his shoulder. Dressed in his school uniform, he didn't look any less handsome. "Let's go. Hail a cab and ask the driver to go to your house first." "All right." Shui Yaoyao didn't stand on ceremony with Fu Jio. After she hailed a taxi, she sat in the front seat and looked back at the back seat. "Your Highness Jio, is Feng Shang okay?" Fu Jio rubbed Feng Shang's head. "Don't worry, I'm here. All boys will react like this when they drink for the first time." Out of the 3 of them, His Highness Jio drank the most. He had probably drunk 8 or 9 bottles, but His Highness Jio didn't seem to have any reaction at all. This really doesn't seem like a high school student. Shui Yaoyao's house wasn't very far. After going there once, Fu Jio was familiar with the route. After sending the girl back, she said to the driver, "Return to Xing Road." It would take some time to walk, especially since there was a drunkard sitting next to him. Fortunately, this drunkard was quite cute. His every move was acting, and he was simply a mascot. This is not the way back to my house." Feng Shang leaned against the car window, his handsome face distorted. Chapter 165. 7 p.m. at night. The sky was already dark. The northern region had started its own smog. All the roads in Jiang City entered the rush hour. In the living room of the Fu family, ever since Qin Mo came in, Chen Xiaodong didn't know where to put his hands. He stood stiffly at the side. "You mean your young master isn't back yet?" Qin Mo sat on the sofa, his tone calm. He took off his gloves slowly, exuding an aura of nobility. Chen Xiaodong couldn't think of a reason why young Master Qin would appear at his house. Even if his young master angered him, young Master Qin wouldn't come personally to capture him. However, it was better to be safe than sorry. Should he call his young master first? Qin Mo raised his eyebrows when Chen Xiaodong didn't reply. Chen Xiaodong felt his scalp go numb. "Yes, my young master said he was going to sleep at a friend's place last night. He hasn't come back yet. Why don't I go to the nightclub to look for my young master? Maybe he's back to his old habits." He couldn't figure out what his young master was busy with recently. Qin Emo smiled when he heard this. If your young master really went to the nightclub, then he doesn't need to come back today. It was originally a very ordinary sentence, but Chen Xiaodong didn't know why, but he actually heard the coldness in it. Why? Chen Xiaodong didn't understand what was wrong with going to the nightclub. After all, it was normal for his young master to go to the nightclub. I came in a hurry this time, so I didn't bring any gifts for boss he. Qin Emo spoke again, polite and indifferent. His face was noble and handsome no matter how you looked at it. Boss he probably isn't back yet. Chen Xiaodong quickly nodded. Yes, madam is on a business trip. She'll be back in Jiangqing City in 2 days. Was young Master Qin going to leave? That was great. Even though young Master Qin was handsome, he felt pressured at such a close distance. Thinking up to this point, Chen Xiaodong decided to respectfully send young Master Qin out. However, he didn't expect this. Where's your young master's room? Qin Emo stood up with one hand in his trousers and the other holding a physics book. Even his tone was casual. Bring me there. Chen Xiaodong. Asterisk 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 asterisk. The darkness of the night grew thicker. When the taxi driver finally dropped Fujio off, Feng Shang walked around in a daze. Fujio grabbed him by the sleeve and dragged him into the Fu family. Fu Zhongyi took almost everything, but he didn't dare to touch the villa. Even the illiterate understood the meaning of marital property. But it was precisely because of this that San Kai refused to let her go. If she didn't enter the Fu family's door, she would never be considered a legitimate wife. Not only did the three know this, but everyone in the business world also knew this. What's more, this villa wasn't cheap. She used so many tricks to poach people from He Honghua. Apart from making He Honghua a laughingstock, there was another reason. She wanted He Honghua to run out of money and have no choice but to sell the villa at a low price. Then, she would be able to take over the villa legitimately. Fujio looked at the brightly lit single-family house in front of her and smiled coldly. Anyone who wanted to destroy her home, she would let them have a taste of what it meant to burn their bones and scatter their ashes. You're tuning in to the Li Mei's Wuxia Whispers YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support, and don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.